steps up. Now we'll throw it for Monunga, and it's incomplete. Oh, it's tipped. It's intercepted. It was tipped into the hands of Hancock, and Hancock along the near sideline. He's got a blocker. One man to beat. Flags come flying in, and Hancock is into the end zone. Right now, touchdown, Ohio State.
This is 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com.
From the 19-yard line, right hash going left to right. Man in motion on the edge. Here's a pass, and it's intercepted. That's Kareni Reed, and he takes it to the house on the first play of the game. 21 yards, a pick six for Kareni Reed in Utah.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Rattler on 3rd and 8. Furman brings pressure, hit as he throws. Jump ball! What a catch! Xavier Legette! He is him!
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Missouri still trying to get set from the end zone. Cook throws one. It's intercepted. House call for Major Burns. And LSU is going to escape Columbia with a win.
Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Search 365 Sports on YouTube. Brought to you by TFNB, your bank for life.
Henderson in motion, looking to throw. Complete. Touchdown, Jared Wiley, the tight end.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
Roy steps up in the pocket. He's going to take off with it, and he's getting the first down and a lot more. This is what he can do. Morrow might have scored.
Now here's Paul Catalina.
Welcome aboard 365 Sports. You will not recognize the person sitting to my right. That is Trey Elling. And you'll get to know Trey throughout the show, but we have a guest that I am so fired up to have on the show. He's been on the show before, Joe Moglia. He is the chair of athletics at Coastal Carolina, and he's also, been a CEO. He's been a coach. He's worn a lot of hats in his career and wrote a fantastic op-ed yesterday in the Indy Star about the future of college athletics and in the wake of House versus NCAA settlement. Joe, thanks so much for joining us today. You got into details, I think, that you might have one of the more unique perspectives on all of this, having been in big business, having been in big college athletics, having been on the lower level of college athletics, coaching and all of that. When you saw all this come together with the House settlement, it appears that you kind of noticed that this is really a Band-Aid on a knife wound.
Well, Paul, I would agree. First of all, I'm delighted to be on. I'm a big fan. And from my end, I think the biggest issue that drives everything here is money. And I think the biggest concern that the NCAA has, and certainly the SEC and the Power Four in general, is that how much is this going to cost us? And the ultimate liability is going to be about $20 billion. And I think they feel they've got a home run because they were able to cut that by about 85%. It's a $2.7 billion settlement. Now, I recognize, your listeners need to recognize that means that what we're trying to do here is go back and pay college athletes going back to 2016. Now, they have a formula for this where they're going to be able to figure out how to do that and how to pay a swimmer in 2016 versus a quarterback in 2020. But it doesn't solve the problems. The problem we've had for the last 3 years is that there's been a lack of leadership. And when the NIL was announced literally a little over 3 years ago, the NCAA was nowhere to be found. Now, Charlie Baker was not the president then. Mark Emmert was. But that I've been on Wall Street and I've been in coaching for 5 decades, and I'm a big on leadership, and that to me was the worst example of leadership I've ever seen. And consequently, since then, there's been nothing but chaos. So they're focused on the money. I understand that. But while they're focused on the money, they still have not been able to come close to solving the problem with regard to what's going on here, with regard to professional athletes, in effect, and amateur athletes. There are 565,000 athletes that involve with college athletics. About 2% of them get anything, let's say, more than $10,000, and 95% of them don't get anything. So we're making this very, very big deal about what's going on. Obviously, it's the upper realm, and I get that because of the money. I understand that. I'm a business guy. But we're not solving any of the problems. These problems still exist, and no matter what happens with the settlement, that's going to continue.
Joe, I love the argument that you make that the state of college sports would be better off with letting the NCAA go bankrupt. For this settlement not to go through, the NCAA has to go bankrupt. But the NCAA and really Power 5 leadership in selling this settlement to everybody else said, look, the NCAA is too big to fail, much like what we heard with banks back during the 2008 financial crisis, that if the NCAA fails, college sport fails. Why do you think that would not be the case if the NCAA were all of a sudden to go away or have to take a drastic change in just what exactly it is that they are responsible for within college sports?
I think the 2008, I was the CEO of TD Ameritrade, and I was very much in the middle of the financial crisis. Now, I'm not sure all the viewers necessarily understand how critical that was. But the financial crisis back then, at that moment in time, if the Federal Reserve and the Treasury of the United States didn't come in and get involved with this, there would have been a global recession, the likes of which would have been comparable, maybe worse than what we had in the 1930s. It was that serious, it was that significant, and we had to have the government come in and help out. Now, the place like Merrill Lynch, which I had worked for, and I'm very, very proud to be part of that. It was an $80 billion company. They had 60,000, 70,000 employees. They were in 47 different countries. And again, one of the greatest brands in the world. And they wound up, in effect, almost going under because of leadership doing a crappy job handling the balance sheet. That's a different discussion. So the Fed and the Treasury and the government, in fact, had Bank of America come in and take over. Now, the reason for that was because Merrill Lynch was considered too big to fail. If Merrill Lynch failed, literally failed, and went out of business, nobody helped them, that would have been catastrophic on a global basis. Catastrophic. Okay. Now, people talk about, the NCAA and trying to protect it all, and comparing that to 2008. I played that a handful of times. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Because the NCAA is not too big to fail, and they've not done a great job managing themselves. Right now, college athletics is in chaos, so NCAA has a lot to do with that, and it needs to take responsibility for that. So if the NCAA went away, by the way, I was when the NIL was announced about over 3 years ago. Because the NCAA was not involved, I thought all college athletics should break away from the NCAA. Obviously, that didn't happen. Now I think Power 5 football should break away from the NCAA and handle what they need to handle on their own. So with the money at stake, with the liability of $20 billion could bankrupt the NCAA. And oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, the NCAA went away. The conferences take over, and within a year or two, everything could be fixed. And probably in a way that's better than what we're doing now. Right now, I think President Baker of the NCAA is doing everything he can to make sure that Power 5 football stays within the realm of the NCAA. But they're working so hard to be able to do that, and maybe that's ego, whatever the reasons are. But right now, we are professional student athletes, and we're trying to treat them the way we've always treated the rest of the student athletes over the span of the last 5 decades. That's not going to work.
You proposed splitting off into what you call the PCAA, the professional college athletes, and the ACAA, the amateur college athletes, and you could move, between the two. But again, you'd have to be recruited, like you said. But this would allow, the schools that are not going to ever be able to, because one, the big conferences, will take every chance they can to wall them off. and make sure they don't, or that they just are never going to be big enough to compete financially, to operate in a sphere that is acceptable to them. And then the other conferences and the PCA can put the pedal to the floor and do whatever they wish to do in making that, essentially a Fortune 500 company.
The Power 5 schools, the Power 4 schools that I'm suggesting become the PCAA, Professional Collegiate Athletic Association, instead of the NCAA. They're not worried. They're not worried. They're not trying to prevent the rest of the schools, the Group of 5 schools, or the FCS and football, or the Division II, Division III. They're not trying to prevent them from doing anything. They're just focused on what's in their best interest. Well, what's in their best interest may not be in the best interest of the Group of 5 schools or other sports or Division II or Division III. So they're just focused on what they need to do for themselves. I get that. But if they're going to have professional student athletes, make believe this is a business. It's professional student athletes. It's a business. They don't even talk about academics. It's a business. So what's the best way to run a business? Well, why don't you look at business people in the sports world that have done a good job of doing that? NFL, NBA, NHL, et cetera. Not the NCAA. So if the more elite, let's begin with division, just kind of, for purposes of illustration, the Power 5, Division I, football, and men and women's basketball. If they're going to be professional, they got to break away and they got to run themselves the way a professional business would run themselves. If the NFL was running themselves the way college football is today, they'd go out of business, literally go out of business. So that's where we're headed. We're going down a bad road here. So if we had a PCAA, Professional Collegiate Athletic Association, they break away from the NCAA and they hire their own executive team that has real authority and autonomy, similar to the commissioner in the NFL, and they model themselves after the NFL. They have collective bargaining. They have salary caps. They have real contracts that matter, that are held up, and you go forward with that. Now, the rest of college athletics, frankly, stays the way it's been for the last 50 years. And if certain schools want to move up, become professional, there's no reason why they can't do that as long as they're qualified, as long as they're doing well enough to do that. If an individual athlete's good enough to get paid, great. But somebody's got to pay him. Somebody's got to. Today, there are a gazillion people that put themselves on the portal. 95% of them don't get a dime out of that. So if you're good enough to be recruited and you happen to be at the amateur level, the Amateur Collegiate Athletic Association, ACAA, well then if the PCAA recruits you, well great. Then you move up, but you get away from this constant. Right now, everybody is a free agent every day, and everybody puts their name on the portal because they want to find out what the value is and how much they're going to get paid. And there are very few coaches Division I level, including ours. You go and you're recruiting a kid at the football level, and the family. The first thing they want to know is what's the NIL opportunity. So we have become professional sports in an area that has no experience running professional businesses. So break it apart. Have the professional pieces run like professional athletics businesses, and the rest of the NCAA can stay similar to what it is, amateur athletics.
The settlement from a couple of weeks ago was filled with contradictions. Perhaps the biggest contradiction is allowing schools and athletics departments to pay their student athletes while also insisting that these student athletes are not employees of the university. How much of this do you think has to do with them trying to dodge the idea of short and long-term disability liability? And what else do you think is factoring into their desire to keep student athletes from ever being considered employees of their schools?
All of that. Everything you're saying, Paul, is right on. Who cares what they're called? They're getting paid. They're professionals. If there are other questions that are associated with that, and we're definitely going that direction. Are there are there benefits? What else is going on? Oh, we're going to have unions? Yeah, they're going to have unions. There got to be benefits. That's why it's a business. So that's why the NFL's got benefits. The NFL has pension plans. The NFL has medical support. The NFL has all those things. Well, that's what Professional Collegiate Athletic Association should be having. But we don't know how to run that. So they need to break away to be able to model themselves after somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about and do it that way. So all those things are part of a professional business, which NCAA is frankly is not qualified to be able to run. And we're too occupied with what's going on today and trying to manage today and not recognizing where college athletics is going to be 3 to 5 years from now. If you look down the road, this is very, very clear that the direction I think I'm talking about is the direction they're going to go.
How do you feel about private equity or private capital, as it's been called, at least in regard to college athletics, getting involved here? I think the fear is that somebody's program will be turned into Red Lobster. And the rosier side of it is just that you kind of have angel investors that are seeing an opportunity to help college athletics programs go. And the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but you've been in both sides of this. How do you see that working out? Because that feels a little inevitable in some reaches too, especially for schools that are, want to close the gap like Florida State and Clemson do between schools in the Big Ten and SEC who are making more money.
Okay, so the reality of this is that we're talking about asset management business in the financial world, Wall Street. That's where Wall Street comes into play here. Mm-hmm. And they see an opportunity where there's money to be made in an area where management doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't have any experience in it. So I said a minute ago, we're focused on today and how we're going to be able to handle our problems today and how we're going to pay our bills today, how we're going to make money today. Now, we're not focused where we're going to be down 3 to 5 years down the road. A business cannot focus on what you're doing today. They got to focus on what you're doing today and how is it going to affect a year, 2, 3 down the road. So when private equity or private capital come in, what they're doing is they're seeing an opportunity to solve a near-term problem. Near-term problem is the respective schools need to be able to have more money NIL-wise to be able to pay their athletes. So not all of them have that. By the way, a lot of Power 4 have those, but a lot of the non-Power 4 schools don't have that. So how are they going to be able to help? Well, they're going to be able to help by provide money up front. They provide money up front. Guess what? They're not doing that for kicks. Otherwise, they're giving donations. Then they should just make contributions to the university, or just pay NIL directly. But what they're doing is that they're doing this because they want to be able to get a return. So they're putting money up front with the expectation they're going to get a big return down the road. Now, if you're doing that at Ohio State, well, you know what? They make a tremendous amount of money in athletics. You probably did get a reasonable return. But Ohio State doesn't need private equity. Coastal Carolina does. All right, but the amount of money, we're very, very proud of what we do at Coastal. We're competitive. We handle ourselves. Again, we couldn't be prouder of who we are and what we're doing. But down the road, it's not like we're going to be making tremendous amounts of money. We're going to have difficulty giving them the return that, in effect, they would want, private equity or private capital. So I can appreciate if I'm on Wall Street, if I'm running Ameritrade, and I want to get involved with asset management, I want our people looking into this. But at the end of the day, I'm going to hold them accountable for a return down the road. And to me, that's a little bit of a question mark. Because we're really going to get a return, i.e. the more elite Power 4 schools, they don't need that. They don't need their capital.
Yeah, Joe, I'm glad you just mentioned all of that because I am a fan of one of those major Power 4 universities, and I thought it was despicable that the non-Power 5 schools end up on the hook for 60% of that 2.7, it's not the 60% of 2.7 billion, but the percentage that schools owe, the non-Power 5 schools owe 60% of that, with the Power 5 owing the other 40%, despite the fact that those non-Power 5 schools did not receive a vote in that settlement. That is unfair, and that's the NCAA and the Power 5s holding those schools hostage. So short of getting some massive windfall through private equity or some other funding source, do you see a lot of athletics departments either having to scale way back in terms of the sports that are offered or maybe disappearing altogether?
I think they need to be able to have a total refocus in terms of what's going on. That's why I'm suggesting that I think this is very clear in my head that there needs to be separation. So if you want to run professional in certain sports, by the way, the Power 4 schools can have, again, as I said earlier, Paul, they can have, let's say, football and men and women's basketball. Well, the other sports don't have to be professional. So whatever's not professional can still report to the NCAA. So if you're an amateur, you report to the NCAA. All things are no longer problems. The issue is if you're going to get paid, you got to run it like a business. You cannot. If Power 4 that are getting paid. Talk about football for a second. Power 4 in football, if they're really truly getting paid and they're running themselves like a professional organization, they're going to have their own national championship. Then the rest of the schools have to have their respective national championships. It's not a level playing field. So why make believe? Why make believe it is? It's not, right? So therefore, pretty much 90% of college athletics can be run the way it's currently run, and run effectively and run efficiently. But you can't. Do not make believe that that's going to be the same as what the professional sport's going to be able to do.
Joe, and this is the last thing before we let you go, and thanks so much for hopping on with us today. It's always an education when we get to talk to you. You mentioned having someone who knows how to run a business running college athletics. If that thing did happen, is that a job that you would like?
I think, you know what, I think I spent 25 years earning a living as a football coach, and 25 years on Wall Street. And collegiate athletics and academic life, the world of college, world of university life, academics, the social part, the athletic part, all that really, really does matter to me. It's been a critical part of my life. And I want to see us get it right. If I were approached and had real autonomy, but I got to be, it's not going to be a committee. It's not going to be, I've got to get people, bring people to approve things. The professional group that would want to go after this, if they wanted me, they would need to give me autonomy to make sure I do it the right way. And if I had something like that, I think I'd have to stop and seriously consider that. I don't see any of the leadership so far in college athletics moving in that direction at all. So I don't see that happening. But at some point in time, it will. If they think 3 years from now, they're going to start making better decisions today. But right now, all they're doing is trying to make sure that whatever their financial liability is going to be, you're going to keep it as minimal as possible.
Joe, thank you again so much. Look, it's always great to lead off the show also with a fellow Italian. So I appreciate that a great deal. I loved what you wrote. It was very educational. It was as deep a dive into the nuts and bolts of something as I think I've read the whole time this has been going on. Thank you so much. Enjoy the summer, and we'll talk to you again sometime.
So one of the things that the Italians have is that poor Trey never had an opportunity to open his mouth. Okay, so sometimes
he was there. He asked you. He asked you a couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All
Thanks,
right.
fellas.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Bye-bye. Oh, man. That was everything I wanted it to be. Like, I knew it was going to be, but you actually sent me the article this morning, and I was like, Garrett and I yesterday, we were trying to get him. We were trying to get him for yesterday. And, of course, he's a very busy guy. As an administrator and all that, and writing these op-eds, he's fantastic. Love talking to him whenever we get a chance. So that was a lot. I mean, like, outside of, like, individual details, I think that, like, you could really, not nitpick a lot about what he said, like in the column, because it makes more sense. And I think that's where it's headed. And as much as part of the other thing I think we need to get through as college fans is and I said this yesterday at the open of the show, it's never going to be how it was again. So we want it to be as good as it can be in the future so that it's not chaotic. This is, for all the different cool things that happen because of the new rules, it's still so chaotic, it's hard to love as much. And we need to get to a point where we can love it again and we can understand it, even though we have to let go of what it was.
And one of the reasons why it's as chaotic as it is because the NCAA has continued to mismanage things, especially on the college football side of things, for decades now. especially the last decade, as you could see the direction that all of this was headed in, and they were still seemingly operating 5 to 10 years behind the times. Even when it was on the verge of NIL becoming a reality, they were still making the argument that that should not be the case versus preparing properly and trying to plan a couple of years into the future. So the NCAA has had plenty of opportunity to be the overriding authority of all of this, and sadly, they've only made things worse. They've only loosened up what it takes for a kid to go from one school to another. I know they tried to dial that back a little bit this last football season and wield those rules very arbitrarily, but the bottom line is that the NCAA has failed too consistently over the recent and long-term past to where even those schools that seem to have its back right now, the SEC schools, the Big Ten schools, even some of the other Power Four conferences and schools, they know deep down that in order to have authority, in order to be able to levy discipline, it requires respect. Nobody respects the NCAA anymore. They can still run their basketball tournament if they want to. They can still run the tournaments for those Olympic sports. They certainly need to be all the way out of college football at this point, though.
Yeah, and look, eventually they're probably going to be out of basketball too. Because
Probably.
as that gets bigger and bigger, they're not going to want to, deal with that. Because again, they won't they'll find a way to get the money directly, into just say the PCAA, like Joe just told us about. So I totally, it's got to change. It has to change, and we have to be willing to let things change. And, we are in a period in America where the wheels of things turn slower, even though the world moves faster. It's so strange. We haven't passed a constitutional amendment in 50 years. It wasn't a big deal. They got it done faster in the friggin' 1800s than we did. We don't do those things. So when it just our American brains in change, we are so ingrained of nostalgia and how it used to be or how we think things should be, as opposed to dealing with things how they are and things how they will be. And I think that's just, it's in our bones to no, this is how it works. This is the only way I understand how it works. Well, sometimes, you gotta move somebody out of their chair a little bit.
Not to go too Tom Herman with my cliches right now, because, then I'd have to have you put on a helmet and then I'd try and headbutt you before we lost a football game to the Baylor Bears. But change is hard. It is. And people resist because we love our comfort zones. But change is also not only important at times, it's also healthy to challenge yourself. And we're at a point now where we see the way things currently stand, and the powers that be, those gatekeeping dinosaurs that have been in charge for a long time now, don't seem to understand the need to do something drastically different here. They've been forced to do certain things differently, things like NIL and the collectives coming together, now trying to get the collectives under the athletics umbrella. And they have expanded the college football playoff many years too late, in my opinion. But we need something much greater in terms of that change, and to provide a full-on separation, whether you're talking about the Big Ten and SEC or the Power Four separating themselves from the rest of college football. Maybe you consider doing that with basketball as well. It is what had been suggested in that article by Joe in the Indy Star yesterday. You need to separate at least the biggest of those revenue-making sports, because it's going to simplify things for the rest of college sports. At that point, Title IX, which is an important rule, becomes a little bit more logical with regards to how it's enforced. And when you're talking about rev sharing with student athletes, that becomes much simpler too, because football is its own thing at that point in time. And so the ability to do so, or the desire to do so, then gets spread out a little bit more fairly amongst some of those other sports.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break right here, and then we're going to get into the stack. The news of the day. Thanks so much to Joe Moglia. I think that's a whole segment we need to probably put on 365 Sports tonight as well. So not chop it up at all. I want our local audience to make sure they see that as well, because it was really, really informative, really, really smart, and gives you a perspective from somebody who has walked in both worlds and is, maybe college athletics needs to, like I said, call Joe and go hey, you seem to kind of understand how both these things work really well. So how can we make them work well together? As opposed to what college athletics normally does is okay, we're going to send everybody to a weekend course. Now you know how to deal with Title IX. You did 72 hours at a at a Ritz-Carlton in Denver, you're all right. Done. Coming up next, The Stack. This is 365 Sports.
It's the season to rev up your drive with Alan Samuels with the new Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram in Waco. Your ultimate destination for unbeatable deals and top-notch service. Looking for a reliable ride to conquer these beautiful spring days? Look no further. The powerful trucks and sleek sedans are the perfect SUV. We've got the perfect vehicle to match your style and budget. Over 300 new vehicles to choose from. Now's the time to make your move. Enjoy special discounts, low financing rates, and incredible incentives. But hurry, these offers won't last forever. Alan Samuels in Waco.
Come by. Let's be friends.
Stepping into the boots of a U.S. Army officer can add confidence and leadership skills to your son or daughter's career path. See all the things they can achieve in our boots at GoArmy.com. U.S. Army Waco Recruiting Company, 254-598-8131 or 254-776-1543.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one. Commercial, farm and ranch, or residential, Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm. Welcome home.
Parenting is full of surprises.
You never know what to expect.
So after our son was born, I called my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent to set up a life insurance policy in case something happened to me.
Sawyer is now 2.
And we'll soon have a sister. There's no one else I would trust with protecting my family.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Baylor alumni are more than 160,000 strong. When we all join hands to support our university, we don't just move the needle, we move mountains. Working together, we create life-changing opportunities for students on the field, in the classroom, in the laboratory, and in life for generations to come. So get connected, get involved. Learn how at baylor.edu/alumni.
Let the journey to financial brilliance begin with Genco's limited time offers. Max your earnings with a Kasasa cash account and get paid monthly with a 4.25 APY. That's $425 annually. Then invest in a 13-month share certificate and earn 4.9 APY. That's $529. Earn cash and outshine the rest. At Genco, we offer you the sun and the moon. Kasasa based on average daily balance of $10,000. Certificate based on $10,000 investment. See GencoFCU.org for details. NCUA.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
Welcome back, Paul Catalina, Trey Elling. In the next segment, you'll get to know Trey. We'll find out his hopes and dreams, his fears, his weaknesses,
Trying to do facial expressions for all those things.
What his social security number is, the passwords to his accounts.
358.
Yeah, those things. Emery is a very skilled identity thief, so just be careful. I don't even know if his name is Emery at all.
I doubt it. It's from Oklahoma. You can't trust him.
Yeah. I mean, I've searched for Emery Winter on the internet, and there's just really no trace of him. There's a couple of social media accounts, so that could be anybody.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, anyway, let's dive into it. First off, I'm not starting with Danny Hurley. We're going to do that second. But because we've got so many realignment nicks in the studio, realignment or in the chat, I thought I would dive into this. Today to the Big 12 board, Brett Yormark said, I have always had Hold on. I've lost this one altogether. Garrett, hold on. Give me 1 second so I can pull that back up. But in regards to expansion, I always have optionality as a conference. I will continue when the time is right to offer options to Big 12 board and ADs on any kind of Big 12 expansion. And that kind of just falls in line with what he says. Here's Brett Yormark's party line. Right now, they're open for business. What he means is actual business. And if there are opportunities out there, and I think that, when the ACC decisions are made, there will be opportunities for the Big 12 there if they want them. I would think Duke, NC State, Georgia Tech, schools like that, Pitt would, at least before they decide what they're going to do with the remnants of the ACC, either stay together or go apart, would at least call the Big 12 and say, all right, what can we work out, and what money will be available if the ACC did, in fact, collapse, because then there's a whole thing that ESPN, would have, like, ESPN right now has the option at 2027 to end the TV deal. And if Clemson and Florida State are out, I can't see them not doing that. And then either rebuilding the ACC with what they have left and letting the parts go where they may, and then that group stays together as the ACC and probably loses their network, quite honestly. But they at least have a deal and they have a conference together that's however many teams. But until that happens, until the Florida State and Clemson dominoes fall, we're really not going to know. But I don't think he is actively shopping for anybody right now, especially not before they've even played one season as a 16-team league.
I think he's probably keeping his eyes and ears open, but he's not actively pursuing anyone right now.
Which I think is different than the Pac-12 situation, because there is so much that is nebulous about the ACC. That's where the Pac-12 was, well, if this thing doesn't get done and there's no TV deal, then next year they're available, as opposed to, well, we could get some ACC teams, but it might be 2031.
And Brett Yormark realized that the Pac-12 was crumbling, and he was also trying to keep the Big 12 relevant, which is why if you are a school in the Big 12 right now, you give him a ton of credit, and you also give him autonomy, the autonomy that Bob was talking about last segment, because he did take the Big 12 from completely irrelevant to arguably the third best conference in college football and one of the best sports conferences in the country when you consider all sports. Texas fans don't like to hear this out of me because I am a Longhorns fan, to reveal a little bit earlier just who and what I am. But I'm also a Longhorn fan who has immense respect for Brett Yormark. I've had the pleasure of speaking with him at Big 12 Media Days, the last two Big 12 Media Days, and came away extremely impressed with how forthright he was in his answers, but also how he conducts his business as well. And I've said this to Longhorn fans. If Brett Yormark was the commissioner of the Big 12 those last couple of years before Texas and Oklahoma decided to make their move to the SEC, Texas and Oklahoma may not have gone to the SEC because they would have been in the hands of better leadership than what Bob Bowlesby was giving the conference towards the end. We talked about gatekeeping dinosaurs last segment. Unfortunately, that's what Bob Bowlesby was. Brett Yormark is a guy who obviously has a ton of experience, but he is also a risk taker. He is a calculated risk taker, and that has served his conference well. And will he maybe eventually move on to bigger and better things? Yeah, perhaps. But for right now, he is making sure that every fight that he is getting into, every battle that he is waging, is something that is ultimately going to benefit the schools in his conference.
Yeah, that's the case. I mean, I don't, people get excited because anytime, like there was some minor Florida State ACC like appeals news today, and I didn't even get to it because what happens is you're like, oh, this, like, man, if you're going to get excited about every like little procedural move in a court case, maybe you should go get into law, because, or you should just spend a day with an attorney. They're like, hey, we going to court today? No. What are we going to do? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do paperwork. I'm going to get on the phone with other people who are doing paperwork, and I'm going to read all these books to see if the paperwork I'm doing is right. So, yippee!
It's simple with the ACC stuff right now. Just like when it was inevitable that NIL was going to be happening in college sports, just know that the fights that Florida State and Clemson are waging right now is contingent on the ACC not being able to keep that TV contract secretive. And it is essentially starting to come out now, and it's not as ironclad as it was being sold to the media less than a year ago. And by the way, who was selling that to the media that it was an ironclad contract? It was the ACC doing so, while also not letting anybody see that original contract. So now that they're actually having to show those details, Florida State, Clemson, whatever other schools want out of the ACC are going to find their way out. It's only a matter of time. And when that happens, Greg Sankey last week at SEC meetings was no longer closed off to the idea of eventual expansion. You're going to see them taking a look at Florida State. Clemson perhaps, although Dabo Swinney is trying really hard to make Clemson irrelevant because he refuses to play the NIL game and refuses to look in the transfer portal.
I think they play the NIL game. I just don't think I think he's detached from it. Like
But you need your coach to be on board with that to really be able to play that game. And he speaks so negatively about it while, by the way, putting laser tag setups in his football offices. It's like, at some point, Dabo, you need to come to terms with this. Otherwise, you're going to render yourself irrelevant. But to the Brett Yormark point, Brett Yormark, he's keeping his eyes open with the ACC, and he's having to evaluate right now which schools would make the most sense for him. I think that when you talk about the Dukes and maybe the North Carolinas, that makes a lot of sense because Brett Yormark does have that basketball background. He went to Indiana. He's a huge college basketball fan, and he knows that while he may not be able to get the bluest of bloods with regards to college football, he can still make his mark in college basketball, but especially because that landscape is changing. He talked about the NCAA may not even have control over the basketball tournament before it's all said and done. What's coming down the pike next college basketball season? At the end of the year, it's a tournament in Vegas where there's actually money on the line. So schools may have the option of opting out of the actual March Madness to go play in Vegas and have their guys maybe win some money if they can win their last 5 games of the season.
Yeah, no, that's all. Everything's changing. Everything's changing. And, it's kind of get busy living or get busy dying, the little Shawshank there for you because that's what they have to do.
Adapt or die.
Yeah. Okay. Story number 2, which really is the more important story of the day, story number 1. But we always have to, tickle the fancies of the realignment people.
Always.
Yeah. Because again, we know why you started watching us. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. So, but just to address that with Brett Yormark, but this is a huge story. Back-to-back national championship winning coach Danny Hurley is in contract with the Lakers, in contract talks, and go ahead and go to the next one from John Fanta. He's informed the team that he's doing this. Now, no final decision has been made, and if we remember 20 or so years ago, the Lakers had Coach K almost in the building, and a student wrote him an impassioned letter, and that changed his mind. It was, I think it was a Tom Rinaldi story on ESPN. If you can go back and find it in the archives, it was a really well done one. I remember Coach K reading the letter in the story going, man, that's something else. And as a fan of ACC basketball, I hate him. I do nothing but respect him, but I hate him. He's ruined too many of my days. but yeah, it was unbelievable to hear that from him. And I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think Dan Hurley's gone. I think he's going to the Lakers. I think that's going to happen. It is a different job now than it was 20 years ago. And this is a guy who's had back-to-back national championships having to recruit his own roster. Like, that was not a thing. Coach K didn't have to worry about that. He won a national championship. He didn't have to worry about one of those guys coming to him going, hey, I could go to St. John's this year and they're going to give me $2 million. And he's like, hold on. Can we give this guy $2 million? All right. No, don't go to St. John's. And then another guy comes like, oh, by the way, Louisville called and I could make 1.5. Hold on. Hey, can we get this guy $1.5 million? Yes, we can. Okay, don't go to Louisville. Or like, now it's like, well, I just go. I'll wait for the other guy to come in who's just the same as you, and I'll give him the money. We're not going to play this game. Like, it's too exhausting. And there's no real family time, like all these things. In fact, coaches across the country, the associations are trying to changing recruiting calendars so they have some sort of quality of life. Because the problem is that you put someone in charge, especially with expanding staffs and all that. But what Nick Saban did, when they had to restrict the amount of people who could actually call people and recruit, was when they took away those rules. No one thought that Nick Saban and coaches like that would go, well, we're just going to have a phone bank of guys calling recruits all day long. And then everybody else is like, well, I can't hire people that fast. I can't, we have to put a cap on this, so you can't do that. Well, if you let workaholics run things, then you're going to have to constantly keep up with them in sports. And as opposed, not to saying like, you've got to have a balance. And then you've got these coaches that drive themselves in the ground. And what used to be a much harder job in pro sports because of all that. Now, if I can go to the Lakers and Rich Pavelka, who's the GM?
Rob Pelinka.
Sorry, Rob. Rob Pelinka, the GM, he and I talk about, well, I would like this player and this player. I've got LeBron and Anthony Davis. Like, what do you think about us re-signing Alex Caruso? Yeah, I think that would be good. Who can we go out and trade for? Yeah, we can get that guy. I'll work it out. You go do all the money stuff. I'll just sit here with my whiteboard and draw up plays and, deal with the day-to-day of, basketball divas. That's way easier than, constantly being barraged by free agency. So I think he's going to do it. I think he's, and all the people say like, he's too harsh for the NBA or all that. Okay, tell him he can't.
As things currently stand with college football and college basketball, I will not blame a college coach at all for going to the pro ranks because the job is so much more exhausting now because it is nonstop player movement. And unfortunately for college basketball fans, a product that has already been greatly diminished over the last 20 years is now even suffering a worse fate because the roster turnover is so great from year to year. I've been saying this for a couple of years now. It's why Chris Beard was so effective at Texas Tech and then the University of Texas and will eventually be so at Ole Miss. He was incredible with off-season roster construction and understanding the value of the transfer portal, but also getting guys in who could be in the program for at least a couple of years because you can bring all the talent in the world you want to a roster in a single season. They're likely not going to reach their potential because guys have to play together for a while in order to get to that point. And Hurley is a great example of a guy who understood the value of roster construction, bringing guys in who maybe needed a couple of years to develop, occasionally using the transfer portal, but making sure that there was a sort of family vibe to what it was that he was doing. And it's a big reason why we saw the UConn Huskies going back-to-back. And I'll be fascinated to see how his ideologies work at the NBA level. I actually think Coach K would have failed as an NBA coach because Coach K is too much of an authoritarian, too much of a disciplinarian, and we've seen examples from basketball, but especially football, of guys who are like that in the college game and find success, but can't do that in the pros because those guys are making a whole lot more money than they are. Hurley has a very level-headed, almost stoic perspective about things that I could see playing really well with the pro game.
Yeah, and sometimes, you need somebody who can push back on guys respectfully.
True.
And I think LeBron James needs that a little bit.
Respectfully is the key word there.
Like the problem with LeBron is that you can't really tell him anything he doesn't want to hear. But I think Dan Hurley can do that in a respectful way and say, like, listen, LeBron, go be LeBron. I'll be Dan Hurley, and we'll meet in the middle here.
And who is the best in the history of the NBA at that as a head coach?
Phil Jackson.
Phil Jackson, exactly. Yeah. He's got a similar demeanor to Phil Jackson. They have their differences, but in that regard, I think they are similar.
Phil Jackson knew that you can't treat every player the same way, but you can treat all of them the same level of fairness. You can be exactly the same level of fair to everybody. So you can indulge Dennis Rodman and let him do that as long as you find ways to indulge guys in whatever healthy ways you can all the way around. And if it was, who was it? I think it was like Steve Kerr told this great story about, like, he said, look, I want you to go to, we're in here, go to Vegas with Rodman. And then, Rodman got to go and sleep in, and then they had to, got back and went right to practice. And it's that. Jimmy Johnson was great with the Cowboys with that. He cut the guy John Roper fell asleep in the meeting, and they said, somebody asked him, well, what if Emmitt Smith fell asleep? And he said, I would give him a pillow, turn down the lights, and tell everybody shut up. Like, there's differences, but you can do that. I think Dan Hurley can do that. Also, I think people thought Coach K could because he did so well with that Olympic team when he was coaching them. But that's a short thing. Right?
It's a short thing, and it's also the U.S. Olympic team back then as the rest of the world was still trying to play catch-up.
Well, they had fallen off when Coach K took over and not won the gold medal, and there was a drive, and also, he had the benefit of Kobe.
Yeah.
So, if you've watched – did you see that documentary they did about it?
I don't think so.
The Redeem team on that. Oh my God, it's good. And it's all the guys, and they're basically talking about we're off in Greece and we're having this big old time. We're doing all this stuff. And we're coming back in, 3:30 in the morning and getting on the elevator, and Kobe's going downstairs to lift weights. And he's like, maybe we need to, do Kobe. That we'll try to do that. And so that's what kind of flipped them around that. And Coach K was able to reach all those guys. Of course, they were really young, too. That was a really young group for an Olympic team, overall. Number 3 here on the list, the college football playoff schedule. This, came out, and you get to see the games that'll be on TNT as well, which we'll talk about in a second. Bob Thompson explained it. We had him on. Was that Monday? Sometime last week.
I can't remember.
I can't remember when we had to Bob on, but the CFP schedule overall, and you see the Friday, December 20th. There's an 8 p.m. game. Saturday, here's what I don't understand. I get it that they want to be on Saturday because college football's on Saturdays. However, and they threw TNT these noon and 4 o'clock games. Well, what else is going to be on then, Trey, at noon and 4?
Good luck, TNT, going up against the NFL.
Yes. So the NFL Saturday games. And
that's week 16, by the way. So there's a strong likelihood that those games will have some sort of playoff implications.
Yes. So, and then New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, you see the games all on ESPN. And then Thursday, January 9th and Friday the 10th. That's a good idea, guys. That's a good idea. Do that. And then Monday, January 20th, which I still think is too long after. I don't think they need 10 days off.
Personally. I also think they don't need to play the game on a Monday night because I always forget about it. Honestly, that week in between, and then you get to Monday, and it's like you have the NFL playoffs all weekend, and you kind of get lost in the shuffle a bit.
I'd rather have it on Friday, January 17th.
Yeah.
That's what I would feel better. Especially going into the weekend, that's what I'd like to do it.
Start it off.
Especially if I was going there,
Friday or Saturday. I mean, college football is played on Saturday. You could maybe come up with some sort of agreement with the NFL where they don't play a playoff game on that Saturday night, and you get that time slot.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. They have no interest in working together going forward. Here's what Bob Thompson said about that. There's the TNT games. They got the worst. They got the worst end of this. Absolutely, they're going to have to fight it. But guess what? You want in the game? Let's get in it. Let's not mess around anymore. So this is what you get, right, guys? You're going to fight the NFL. Okay, good luck, TNT.
Yeah, and as he points out in that follow-up tweet, one of those TNT games will have a G5 school too.
Oh yes.
So enjoy watching Boise State in one of those games.
Well, I think these will do fine ratings-wise overall, whether the G5 team is in it or not, as a good number. But going up against, if you have Boise State and Notre Dame, say, on that game, it'll get a lot of eyeballs because it's Notre Dame, and people will be there watching, curious about Boise State, right? But
if
the
it's
problem is if it's against the Cowboys and the Eagles, you're kind of screwed.
Well, and if it's Cowboys-Eagles and it's Michigan State, Boise State, all of a sudden that has a very different feel than Notre Dame, Boise State. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So Tim Brando's talked about this with us all the time. It's one of his biggest pet peeves is the NFL used to respect Saturdays in December. And then when college football like capitulated it to them, they're like, well, then you're not gonna do anything? You're not gonna put a game that day? Like even though none of these bowl games you're not gonna do anything about it? You're not gonna play for 3 weeks? I mean, are you everybody else seeing this? I guess we'll just put something there. And they did, and they're never leaving.
Well,
they're never leaving.
Yeah, especially because the top 4 teams are going to be getting a bye in the college football playoff. You may as well play that very next week. The week after championship week, you can start those games, and that way you're not having to wrap your season as we get to the end of January.
Yeah.
Because that feels a little bit anti-college football. I know these schedules continue to change, and the Super Bowl used to be played at the end of January, but I would like to keep from pushing college football to the end of January, if at all possible. But as soon as we end up with a 16-team college football playoff, which is probably 5 to 10 years away, then that's going to be an impossibility. But at least for right now.
I think that they should get rid of the conference championship games.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they're going to help them in the future. And that would allow them also to go to 16 pretty smoothly. Because then you could start the 16-team play. And again, I'm fine with 12, 16, okay. I wanted 8. I'll take 12. 16 sometimes might be too much, but
you're starting to allow too much mediocrity in. And we've seen that at the NFL level where you have now 9 and 8 teams making it into the postseason. It's like, does this team deserve to play for a championship?
But if it does, if parity shifts a little bit with transfer, if things shift, then I'm fine with it. But it allows them to go to 16, and you just start right away, and you don't have there's no reason for all this time off between the title games and their first playoff game. Just go. Just effing go. Just do it. I don't understand, other than Army, Navy and keeping away from that and keeping that tradition the way it is, which I'm totally fine with, there's no reason that they can't play Thursday or Friday night of that next week. There's no reason. There's absolutely no reason that they could not set it up. And even playing a Friday night game, Friday and Saturday, and then Thursday, Friday the next week, and then going on down the line and just playing these damn games. Just go to it. What are you waiting for? The coaches don't need the time. They don't. They're going to sell you they do because they want all the time they can have. They don't need it. They do it all the time. To me, the season should be done on January 1st. That's how I think the college football season should be done. It should be done on January 1st. It should be done no later to me than January 8th. If you have to do it that way, if you have to build in a couple more days, that's fine. But January 20th is insane. It's insane. You are fighting the NFL playoffs the whole way. Just move it up. You can even move the season calendar up a week. We see that this year anyway. Move the season calendar up a week so that way you can own December and you can own New Year's Day.
When is the National Signing Day 1 window? Does that coincide with that 10-day break? Because that's the only rationalization.
I think so.
That's the only rationalization I could come up with, but it's not like those schools that are in the playoff aren't going to have to be preparing for that as they're finalizing their class, or at least part 1 of their class, with National Signing Day 1 coming up.
Yeah, we'll break this up into another segment because we've got a little time before we get to Kevin Flarity at 4:30. He's going to talk about Dan Hurley and college basketball in general with us. But last thing before we go to break, Garrett, Ohio State, pull this up. So you'll remember that Florida State is now appealing or trying to get the NCAA to drop some penalties that they agreed to, which I don't know why they did. I guess they were lawyers.
That's all their problems. They agreed to stuff.
Their lawyers were busy trying to fight the ACC, and then they were like, yeah, sure, we agree to these NIL penalties. Just stop looking into it. And the Florida State's NIL penalty was because offensive coordinator Alex Atkins took Amarius Mims, who wound up not transferring from Georgia and staying there, to a meeting with one of FSU's NIL collectives. He drove him there. Then after that, the Tennessee and Virginia injunction came about where Nico Amaliava, they were under investigation for that because of the private jet trip he took, which I promise you was fancier than the F-350, I'm sure, that Alex Atkins drives. I don't know. I don't know what he drives, but he's like a big, broad, like dude. He's an offensive lineman. Like it feels like he's a big truck guy,
possibly
or a big
SUV,
possibly like an expedition.
Yeah,
yeah. Like it feels to me that that's what he would drive. Like I don't know. I have no idea. This is a picture, and shows you how things. And this is Florida State should just show this to the NCAA and say, okay, look, here's what's happened since we agreed to this. This is Brian Hartline, who is the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, at dinner with some of his players, including Jeremiah Smith. I believe Emeka Ibuka is there. Like, so all these offensive players, and they're at dinner at what looks like a very lovely place.
I'm guessing sushi.
With the collective called the Foundation that's there in Columbus. Again, what are we doing? Like, if this is okay, and I'm fine. I'm okay with this. Like, I thought it was stupid that the rules were like, they can get NIL, but they can't ask the coach who knows the NIL guy, how do I talk to the NIL guy? It made it like, okay, you're going to go to the corner of 5th and Main. Somebody's going to come by in a black SUV. Don't get in that one. He will tell you what color SUV you should get in. He will use the code, the donkey has died. Get in that car. Then you'll drive to the corner of 8th and Main, which I know is only 3 blocks away. You'll get into another car, and you'll drive to the actual location. Make sure no one sees you. Throw your cell phone out the window. Like, what are we doing? And here they are like, hey, sushi on the Foundation. Fine. It's fine. This is not a big deal. There's nothing corrupt about this. It was so dumb, and the rules are so arbitrary. I see this, and I'm like, and I want to call Florida State up and go, why? If the NCAA sends you a letter, you're like, okay, good luck, guys. Don't you know how things go for you?
Look, if the NCAA was at all consistent about how they wield their authority and how they discipline people based on breaking the rules, there's another school in the state of Florida that would probably have an entire athletics department death penalty at this point, and that's the U, who since the very beginning has been flagrantly throwing NIL money around to get people to come to South Florida.
All 3 of them would be dead. Jaden Rashada alone would kill.
That's true.
Alone. So, again, let's stop pretending. Like, if I can say one thing to the NCAA, stop pretending. Let's stop playing pretend. We're all adults here. This is not make-believe. This is not what you just stop. When we come back, we're going to get to know Trey, plus get into some other stories. Then at 4:30, we got Kevin Flarity to talk Dan Hurley with us and the likelihood that he goes to the Lakers. This is 365 Sports.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
Don Humidor and Coffee Beans in the Town West Shopping Center in between Richland Drive and Valley Mills in Waco, home of a 48-foot walk-in humidor. Padron, Cohiba, Ashton, Macanudo, Romeo and Julieta, you name it, they have it. The best elite, high-level, world-ranked cigars inside their 48-foot walk-in humidor. My favorite brand is Rocky Patel. They have many different Rocky Patel cigars for you. And Vita Dreams, a CBD product that helps you fall asleep a lot easier and more restful at night. Say you got a lot on your mind, financial, health, emotional, just a really busy week and you're tossing and turning a lot. Vita Dreams will help you find a way to just when you're ready to go to bed 30 minutes or so, hour before, take a Vita Dream, a gummy or 2, and you'll be just fine. Think about when the alarm goes off and you go, man, I just wish I had another 30 minutes. Well, you'll get that extra 30 minutes. Try Vita Dreams. THC product for very chronic serious pain. And then also fresh coffee beans. Don Humidor and Coffee Beans in the Town West Shopping Center. New owner is Josh. Cheyenne is still there in between Richland Drive and Valley Mills in Wake.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Waco Custom Marketplace is your hometown grocery store with a full-service butcher shop and bakery. Hi, this is David Smoke. The butcher shop can take your customized orders for seafood, pork, and poultry and custom cut your favorite steaks from bacon wrap fillets, sirloin steaks, bone-in ribeyes, boneless ribeyes, and even prime rib. Cut specifically the way you want, the thickness that you want. They're all delicious. They have Norwegian salmon, mahi-mahi, catfish fillets, sliced ham or turkey, variety of cheese, and several options of sausage links, and even regular jalapeno or cheese snack sticks, fresh chicken breast or whole chickens, sliced bacon, pork chops, and ground beef, marinated beef or chicken fajitas, and always large briskets and tri-tip available, plus fresh vegetables. So the great product, customer service, and tradition continues at Waco Custom Marketplace, a full-service butcher shop and bakery, open Monday through Saturday. The Bauer family, Waco Custom Marketplace, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco, or WacoCustomMarketplace.com.
Carry On Solutions is a full-service IT management service provider and provides professional services for businesses servicing clients in the U.S. and globally. They are authorized partners with Microsoft, Quest, Veeam, NetApp, HP Enterprise, and Cisco Duo. Whether you are outsourcing IT services, merging companies, or wanting to tackle cybersecurity challenges, contact Carry On Solutions. We are IT. Call or email Dave at 832-437-0138 or sales at Carry On Solutions. That's CARRION Solutions.com.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Enjoying the show? Hit the like button and subscribe.
In this segment, we're going to go through a couple of things. We might push SEC and ACC win totals together.
Yeah, I think we could.
Garrett. We can do that. So, diving in, Paul Catalina, Trey Elling. In a second, we're going to get to know Trey because people need to know his all about him. Open Doors, and I reached out to their CEO today to try to get him on the show, and I've yet to hear back from him, but maybe he can come on Monday. But Open Doors is an NIL company, and they are what I would say is the easiest open field for athletes to get on. That's what they are. If you honestly, if you're a big Texas Tech fan and you want to have an athlete at a party or something that you're having and have them make an appearance, you can go on Open Doors and you can pay them to make an appearance at your business or whatever. It's the easiest way for it's kind of like where you can register to get your NIL started before you get in. So this is also for Open Doors. This is where a lot of volleyball and soccer and baseball and everybody's on it. Trust me, most of the players, maybe Bryce Young wasn't on Open Doors. I actually think he was, but those guys may not do it because, they don't have the time.
The corporate people are going after them too.
Yeah. So he's got, Caleb Williams has Dr. Pepper commercials to do. Let's not, let's not pretend like he's coming to, Big Dave's LA Auto in Santa Monica. That's not going to happen. But that's where it is. So they have a program where they will start assessing athletes' overall value, and they'll start, giving, people what the NCAA, the schools, what they kind of should be paying, slotting things. This is what a player is worth. This is how much you should pay them. That should maybe help the NCAA navigate how they distribute the settlement. Now, ultimately, this is going to be probably fought a little bit by players as well. But this does maybe establish a market value. As right now, there's no real market value. It's Trey Elling, quarterback, University of Texas, is in the portal. And he's going to go tell, LSU that he's worth $500,000 a year, and LSU has to go yes or no. I mean, that's kind of how it is. Like, not to us, you aren't, and then he's like, well, I am to USC. And then he's like, well, have fun in LA. That's just kind of how it is. As we're here, this will kind of set a market value for people because also there's so much secrecy, Trey, around NIL, and there's so much of that if a kid comes to you and says like, well, they offered me this much money, unless you have a way to verify it, you have to roll the dice and deal with it and either not get them or get them. I think coaches have started to figure this out, but if there was an actual chart I could go to, that would be helpful.
You're right about that, but the coaches that are currently handling it correctly have a number in their heads, or the collectives have a number in their heads, and if the kid far exceeds whatever that number is, you just have to be able to say no and not get caught up in a bidding war, because you're right, you may be getting caught up in a bidding war with yourself, with somebody who's just fudging numbers to try and maximize his own value. This is an interesting concept, but much like with Pro Football Focus rankings, I do have to ask the question of who's coming up with these numbers. Mm-hmm. Like, what is the metric that we are using here?
I would trust Open Doors a little bit more because they actually have market data on, they know how much people are paying their athletes to do things. Like, they know that. So
they know some of them.
Yeah, some of them. But I mean, like, they have a ton of athletes.
Yeah.
So they have a ton of data, more data than most have on, okay, this is how much a starting pitcher on Texas A&M's baseball team can command. This is how much a quarterback can command. This is how much, a tight end, a center, defensive tackle, because this is how much we know that we're getting for them. So, I should have just gone to opendoors.com and, all right. Garrett, give me the name of an athlete, a current college athlete.
Current college athlete, Garrett Nussmeier.
All right, let's see if Garrett Nussmeier is on there. Oh, look, there he is. Garrett Nussmeier, athlete, LSU Tigers. So here's the deal. For $43, he'll record a video for you. For $130, he'll post on social media for you. $87 plus for an appearance at a practice or an event. $61 for autograph, and pitch anything for $19.
Pitch anything for $19.
Yeah, 19
Anything?
plus. Like, it's all negotiable.
Okay.
And then for brand or business use, you can create an offer opportunity. So he has like those set rates, and then they would know. So like, say,
what about like Quinn Ewers? Like, because I'm trying to compare quarterbacks, like trying to figure out where they're at, in value. Let's see how close this is.
Okay, Quinn Ewers. It's not close.
That's what I was imagining. It's not
close. It's not close. $476 for a shout out.
How much?
$476.
Good Lord. I mean, there's somebody that's going to pay that too. That is the sad reality.
$1,341 for a post. $1,748 for an appearance. $1,898 for an autograph, and pitch anything $600+. So, yeah.
Okay.
So you see there's a going rate, and some players are worth more than others. So,
by the way, be skeptical, and I'm saying this very tongue-in-cheek, be skeptical of the Open Doors numbers for Nebraska guys, because Blake Lawrence, who is the founder and CEO of Open Doors, was a Nebraska football player too. So those may be inflated, or guys that they're trying to get may be a little bit underinflated to save them a few bucks to get said player.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised. So, well, I hope, look, Paxton, if you want to pay $600.
He might. Paxton might.
Paxton, if you got $600, you and Quinn Ewers can hang out. Paxton's one of our viewers who loves the University of Texas.
Okay. What about Arch Manning, out of curiosity?
Arch Manning.
It's probably higher than Quinn Ewers, right?
It might be at this point, just off of hype.
Off of hype and the fact that he does so little.
Yeah, exactly.
There he is. Okay, Arch Manning. No. Bargain price. $17 for a shout out. $382 for a post, $50 for an appearance, $53 for an autograph, $61 pitch anything.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Huh.
That is shockingly low.
He's humble.
I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's one of those faulty numbers, faulty estimates for open doors.
I really do believe the Mannings have guided
They're
him.
different, yeah.
They've guided him into he was gonna I remember all these people well, Texas just paid for him. Dude, he's Arch Manning. Yeah. He could have gone anybody that they knew the price for Arch Manning. It was not he was gonna go where he wanted. He was gonna get NIL. That was not a problem. He's not like everybody else. His last name, if he was Arch Elling, then you would have had to negotiate a little bit more.
Well, hold on now. Hold on.
But Arch Manning, okay. So now, granted, a year from now when we have this conversation,
right,
those numbers will be up.
I still don't know if he's actually going to be a part of the college football video game.
He said he wasn't.
He's not.
He's definitely not going to be a part of the college football video game. Okay, that report was out there, and apparently it turned out to be true. So I guess you just have to make Arch Manning on your own and make him as good or bad as you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we talked about this last week about logos on the field. It's happened. This was one of those things there was no one who's going to stand in the way of this because, again, what's more advertising dollars? What's more money that we can put into this thing? How can we keep close enough to our margins given the fact that most, a giant chunk of the money that we never intended to give to anybody, we have to give to people now. And how do we offset that? Well, stadium naming rights are on their way for most everybody. I promise you that. It's not just going to be Jones A&T Stadium, AT&T anymore. There's going to be a lot of it. And, college football might be able to have the option of, Doak Campbell Bobby Bowden Field at Doak Campbell Stadium presented by Coca-Cola, but it's still naming rights are coming.
It's a shame, but you would rather that than have to bow to the private equity overlords.
I agree. I think that there'll be, if you get the right one, there's going to be some private capital that's worth it. But like Joe Moglia said, Coastal Carolina could never give them their return.
No.
They never could. No matter how they tried or how good they were, they just can't put out that amount of products. But that's just how it is.
I understand that it's going to end up on stadium facades and on fields too. I'd like to keep from having to see advertising on uniforms. That needs to be a last resort.
That's the last one.
But we're already seeing that with U.S. professional sports. Now, it's not to the degree, you and I were talking before the show starts here, of a soccer or a NASCAR or a minor league baseball outfield wall from the 1980s. Let's just make sure that all other options are exhausted before we start putting ads on college uniforms.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you all the way there. That's the last one, and keep it small.
Yeah.
Keep it small. Simeon Burrow, defensive tackle who had transferred from Michigan State. There was some consternation, and it thought he might leave Miami, whose transfer portal haul has been epic this offseason. We'll see if it works out. Again, Mario Cristobal has taken all the excuses out except for him. That's great. That's what you kind of need to do. Because Miami, he's got a long runway there. They're not going to run him out real fast. But when it comes to recruiting and when it comes to long-term there, what's going to hurt him is if you're 7-5, 8-4 every year, that's just that's how the players are going to see you too. You can, they'll say, oh, we can get you all this NIL at Miami. We can do this. We can do that. And yeah, but if I go to Georgia, we're going to win. So I don't. He can't, he's got to, he and Shannon Dawson have to prove that they can win and make, win games against teams that they're not supposed to win games against more than just once a year by accident, and not lose games that you have in total control because you made bad decisions.
Horrendous decisions.
And he did it. Here's the thing. He did it at Oregon too. The Georgia Tech game was not the first thing, but Simeon Barrow is going to stay. He's going to be a part of a really talented defensive line. Miami's really good up front on both sides of the ball. So we'll see.
Yeah, Oregon dodged a massive bullet with him leaving for Miami and then landing Dan Lanning as an alternative. Dan Lanning doing a great job up in Eugene so far. I'll tell you one thing that may accelerate Mario Cristobal's exit at the U, assuming that they don't get things better and more consistent, and that is if there is a possibility of them getting to take a step up conference-wise. It's why you're probably about to see the Texas Longhorn baseball team replace David Pierce. David Pierce has taken the Longhorns to Omaha 3 times in his 7 years, but there's just a weird vibe amongst the fan base, a very informed fan base, that he isn't exactly the guy for this UT baseball program, and they can't take any chances because they are about to go play in the SEC starting next season, which right now is the best conference for college baseball in the country.
One of the two best.
One of the two best, but they've won.
ACC,
They've won the last 3 national championships. Yeah. So the best team in the country is coming out of the SEC. Texas doesn't want to mess around. They don't want to get lost in the wash, and they've also got an NIL issue there too. Now Miami doesn't have that NIL issue, as we previously discussed. Yeah. If anything, they've got the opposite, where they're almost money whipping too many people now, and the roster ends up getting a little bit convoluted as a result. But Mario Cristobal, it's not quite net cutting time for him just yet, but we're getting closer to that point. He probably only has one more year of 7-5 or 8-4 before some questions are being asked, and he is squarely on the hot seat.
All right, we got about 7 minutes here before we've got to go to break. So this last story we'll get to, Texas A&M will not be bringing back the bonfire tradition for the Texas game. There had been a committee that had been working on this for months, and they had actually suggested bringing it back. The president of the university has decided not to. I don't completely agree with his reasoning. He said that he wanted, if it's not going to be a student thing, and there was a bunch of people who didn't want it back. There are students now who don't know it, so they don't care. So it's like if you're going to ask current students, do you want the bonfire back? Well, they're all younger for the most part. I mean, weren't even alive when the last bonfire, when the collapse happened. I was at that game right after. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever been to in my life. It was really powerful. It was really an amazing, healing moment for a school that really needed it against their biggest rival. And it was a huge thing. And it was very sad, but it was very triumphant. And I understand why the bonfire had to go away, but their new plan is to hire a professional company to do it. And, that way the liability is far different. I think they should. But I think it's a bummer that game's coming back and the bonfire's not. Maybe that'll change in the future, but for right now, no bonfire.
Well, especially because they have an alternative plan in place that has to do with somebody running a football from Austin to College Station. It's like, maybe we're trying a little bit too hard there. Well, I would like to see the bonfire come back. There's a way to do it safely that can honor those unfortunate souls who lost their lives, who were seriously injured 25 years ago, and also bring back what at a point in time was one of the coolest traditions in college football that didn't have to do with anything on the field. It was obviously a pregame deal, and hopefully at some point they change their minds, because I think his reasoning is flimsy too. I know a lot of A&M people who were around the last time and were Aggie fans the last time that the bonfire was held safely, and they would love to see it brought back, just done in a way that you ensure that such an accident doesn't happen again.
You're going to have student interns and people learning from these engineers. It's one of the best engineering schools in the world. Yeah. You would think that this is an opportunity here. I don't know. Again, I don't know all the particulars. I think this is just, he's not confident enough to do it. But, and in the wake, here's the thing that's happened at A&M in the wake of that. They have their traditions council, and they like to keep inventing new traditions. And I just they had plenty to start with. So let's just go back to the ones we know everyone likes.
Maybe we can trade out one stupid A&M tradition to bring the bonfire back. Let's maybe figure out someplace else for that doggy graveyard with the scoreboard above it so that these dead dogs can see the scores of the games, and we can get rid of that altogether and bring the bonfire back as a result.
That one I actually like, but
that backfired on me then, I guess.
That one I like.
No pun intended.
But yeah, no, I would get rid of there's 7 things I would get rid of.
Let's hear. What's one?
That running the football one.
Okay.
I would amend the yell leaders.
What do you mean by amend?
Amend them.
Are you castrate?
No.
Okay.
I would allow actual cheerleaders and just call them something different and have them do something else.
You don't like those ice cream men gesturing all sorts of random ways in the air?
I actually do like it. I just don't like what that organization has become. It's very strange.
Okay.
It's a strange group.
It always has been.
Yeah.
In your lifetime, in our lifetime, it has.
That's fair.
It wasn't always that. when this was a military school, it made sense.
Like back in the 1950s.
Yeah, and like when my father went there, he was class of 1965, it made sense to have yell leaders. There weren't girls. There weren't any. So, it's not the priesthood. I don't understand. I don't get it. I mean, maybe, just maybe. And if you let girls in there, it might get a little less weird. I'm just saying it's weird.
I'm assuming that the sheep fornication went down significantly when they started letting females into the school.
You see a true T-sip here. Just throwing darts.
Oh, I can do this all day.
I'm so glad the rivalry's coming back. I'm so glad it is.
Well, I feel like if there's one thing Texas and Baylor people can agree upon, it's that we do not like A&M very much.
Let me tell you this, though. But Baylor people, here's the worst part about Baylor and A&M. Baylor cared a lot about A&M. A&M did not care about them at all.
Yeah.
And did not, they were a non-factor to A&M. And Baylor would get fired up when they beat them in any sport, basketball, baseball, whatever. And A&M would be like, oh, shucks. But because in the history of Baylor and A&M, I don't know what it exactly is, but it feels like it's 100-5.
Yeah.
A&M never considered them a rival in football. Some of the biggest moments Baylor had were beating A&M, but in my lifetime, they only beat them twice and tied them once. So, it wasn't a rivalry because it was never in doubt. The one that bothers A&M in the old Big 12 was Texas Tech, because they tried to pretend like that wasn't a rivalry, but they would go and lose that game a lot. So
yeah, that started to change in the late 90s and early 2000s, where all of a sudden they had to start treating that like a rivalry because Texas Tech hated them so much.
Well, and A&M's problem has always been that they only cared about Texas. And then, it got so much that, Texas also had, Texas super cared about them. And I don't care what any Texas fan says. They super cared, just only slightly less than Oklahoma. Oklahoma is that's the biggest one.
Yeah.
But A&M was not it wasn't that far behind. Those are the two rivals. It's okay to have two, and you care about one slightly more than the other. Okay, I'll give you my example of Florida State and Miami. I dislike Florida more than I dislike Miami, but it's not if I was planning to go out with Florida and Miami, I would be mad about being with both of them. I would just, Miami and me would be like, Florida, right? That's kind of how it would be. And I feel Oklahoma and Texas would be that way or Oklahoma and A&M would be that way about Texas.
Yeah.
Texas and Baylor are that way about A&M. If you put any three together, they have they don't like each other, none of them. But there's always one in the group this guy, right?
By the way, I'm looking forward to watching 10 minutes of Peter Warwick highlights once the show is over with at 6 o'clock. I cannot wait for that. I've been counting the minutes down all day.
We talked about him on the show yesterday. I put him in the top 5.
One of the all-time great college football players. By the way, a couple more things about A&M, because you're right. They do hate Texas more than they hate anybody else. It's in the song. But there is also such a term as never going full Aggie. Going full Aggie means a lot of different things. We've already talked about the sheep. We've talked some other aspects of things. But the best/worst element of going full Aggie is to let the tiniest bit of success go to your head and make it seem like you just won a national championship, because we also know going full Aggie means claiming championships that didn't also happen, too.
There's only one, 1939.
Right.
That's it.
They've claimed others.
We weren't even in World War II yet. We were just on the fringe of it. But Pearl Harbor was 2 full years away from happening. So just let you know, that's the one right there. Okay, we don't have time. I think people have gotten to know Trey a little bit here.
I think after the Kevin, we can really jump into it.
Yeah, after Kevin, we're going to get to know Trey, and we're going to talk NBA Finals. This is 365 Sports.
Cars priced right, day and night. Average your car in Texas. Trucks built for you, red, white, and blue. Average your car in Texas. Cars that zoom with lots of room. Average your car in Texas. Count on us, a dealer to trust.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at AllianceBankTexas.com. Member FDIC and Equal Housing Lender.
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student-athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student-athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student-athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow @GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student-athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine now has 2 locations to serve you. The original on Lakeshore Drive in North 19th Street and the brand new spot in downtown Waco at 600 Franklin Avenue. If you're looking for the best in craft beers or local Texas bourbons, then the original is the place to be. And for the latest trends and online phenomenons, head downtown to the Franklin location. Either way, you're going to get the same great variety, customer service, and speedy experience. Check out both locations on their Facebook and Instagram pages, Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street, and now downtown on Franklin Avenue.
This is 365 Sports. The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's Paul Catalina.
And Trey Elling, who we'll get to know after our segment with Kevin Flarity here. Kevin Flarity, college basketball insider, has got a new podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks that you need to check out as well. Kevin, the big news in college basketball today is that Dan Hurley is negotiating with the Lakers, and comparing this to the time that they missed out on Coach K, I think a lot of things have changed, and it feels like he's pointing in the direction of going. What do you think happens with Dan Hurley?
Yeah, I think that he is very much listening. I didn't know if you saw the thing with Gino Auriemma where he said that he was kind of joking with him last night, not realizing how serious it was, and said, hey, you could do really well with the Lakers. You could win titles, maybe more so than a guy who hadn't coached before, talking about J.J. Redick as another candidate, and said Hurley kind of had a laugh about it, and then he saw that Hurley was legitimately up for the job, and so I do think it's such a fascinating time in college basketball, and that we've seen coaches that you felt like would kind of coach until they dropped, getting out of the sport or deciding to go a different way because of all the things that you have to deal with now, whether that's the transfer portal, whether that's NIL, whether that's having to reset your roster, every other year. And so I think a lot of those things, like you were alluding to, are changes that would make it more appealing to be in the NBA. Somebody brought up Billy Donovan as the potential candidate, if Dan Hurley were to go. And the argument against Billy Donovan, of course, is Billy Donovan didn't love recruiting before all of this stuff. So I'm not sure that this is going to be any more appealing. But no, I think it's not a done deal, and it's important to emphasize that, because as these things can kind of get down to where you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's and still go south. But at the same time, as of right now, it's something that it wouldn't surprise me at all to see this thing get finished.
Kevin, we were talking about this a couple of segments ago. It really does feel far-fetched that a guy would go from the pro ranks to the college ranks, whether you're talking about basketball or football, but plenty of reasons why someone would do so vice versa, specifically because recruiting is a 24/7 gig, 365 now, on top of the fact that you're constantly having to recruit your own guys. I set all that up, though, to ask you, if you're listing the pros and cons of going from pro to college, is there anything in the pros list for a college job over a pro job with basketball?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you look at a guy like, say, Bill Self, who is somebody that gets the odd, hey, he could go to the NBA type thing. One of the things that he's talked about is, the lack of autonomy at the NBA level. And so, he's able to kind of control every aspect of the Kansas program and do pretty well at it. Whereas if you go to the pros, generally speaking, if you go to a bad place, you may not be there very long because they don't tend to have great job security there. If you go to a good place, chances are that team is going to have a star player or two, and in most cases, they've invested a lot more money into that player than they have into you. And so, being able to really get after your team in a way that, you can say, hey, you're not doing this right, you need to change this. It sounds like something that, coaches everywhere would be able to do, but we've seen that that's not necessarily the case at the NBA level. And it's kind of interesting because you look at Jason Kidd now and the success that he's having when he was with the Milwaukee Bucks. That was something that a lot of people brought up, that he was too hostile, that he got after players too much, and there were relationship things there. And so when you look at it from the other way, yeah, there are some college coaches that aren't going to like going to the NBA because of some of those reasons. And there are some college coaches that might head to the NBA, maybe not realizing those things will be an issue and wind up not lasting a whole lot at that level. You look at John Beilein, I'm not sure he was ever really able to get buy-in when he went to the NBA, certainly not at the level that he was able to get at Michigan.
What do you think happens to that roster if he leaves?
Oh, it's a feeding frenzy, and it's a feeding frenzy because so many teams are a piece or two away, right? I know this is a Baylor show. You look at that Baylor roster, and you could use another center, right? I mean, you look at, I think the roster has one guy over 6'8" right now, and all of a sudden, if you have Paris Reed and Samson Johnson out there, it's a situation where a lot of teams are looking for sort of that one last guy to get them over the hump, and UConn happens to have a lot of those guys. You've got a 5-star recruit in Liam McNeely. You've got an experienced guard in Hassan Diarra. Aiden Mahaney just transferred there from St. Mary's. And so there are a lot of really appealing pieces there. It's part of the reason I think it would be fascinating. I know the candidate that seems to get brought up a lot if something does happen is Steve Peichel from Rutgers. And Rutgers has an incoming freshman class that has 2 5-star guys, 2, projected NBA lottery picks. What happens if those guys, then are able to hit the portal as well? But it's part of the reason I think maybe UConn's best move might be if he does wind up going to hire somebody like Luke Murray from that staff in an interim role, attack the head coaching job in full when it's at a better time in the cycle, because the risk of any coach taking that UConn job right now is your year one could be a huge struggle, because guys could leave and you don't have enough guys out there to replace them. And so I do think that UConn needs to kind of look at that too when they're trying to decide, do we hire an interim guy, do we hire a permanent guy? Is continuity is probably going to be a fairly big thing. And if you hire somebody new, you might not get as good a candidate as you could have gotten, just because of that inherent risk of really having a rough year one if guys do wind up leaving.
Hurley seems like such a complete package right now. Exceptional understanding of X's and O's on both the offensive and defensive end, and has a Zen-like quality that's very reminiscent of, let's say, a Phil Jackson. What do you think he needs to be better at in order to succeed at the NBA level if he ultimately does take this Lakers gig?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if he's able to kind of crawl onto his players at the same level. You know, when Coach K started coaching Team USA, I'm not saying he never got after the guys, but it was something where I think he had to have an understanding of, okay, I can't coach these guys the same way I coach at Duke. And one of the things that I think is one of Dan Hurley's biggest strengths is his adaptability. And so I think he's somebody that would be able to see, like, hey, this might not be working. I'm also, you know, kind of fascinated. UConn's offense is just gorgeous. I mean, it is basketball art to see all the different things that they have built into it. Luke Murray was a guy that helped build that. But I also wonder what that would look like at the NBA level, where a lot of guys kind of, you know, want to get the ball in their hands and make something happen, versus something that's going to involve all five players and make the defense defend all five players. I'm a little interested to see how that offense would translate. I think it would translate pretty well, but it also depends on your personnel buying in.
Do you think Luke Murray is bound for a head coaching job soon? He's one of the better recruiters in the country. Liam McNeely, I think, was, you know, he's the one who locked him down. And plus, he comes with a really cool side benefit.
Yeah, I think so. I think when you look at the recruiting stuff, that would be a benefit in and of itself. I mean, we've seen, obviously, assistant coaches get head coaching jobs basically almost entirely based on the strength of their recruiting. In Luke Murray's case, you know, the impact that he had in terms of sort of rebuilding UConn's offense and building that system, I think you can see the X's and O's kind of layered on top of that. And so I do think that he's bound for a head coaching job somewhere. I'd be really interested if Dan Hurley does wind up leaving, if they do decide to go, hey, you know, we'll go interim with Luke Murray, are they able to keep all those guys in the fold? And if so, you know, is this kind of an audition year for Luke Murray where he has a chance to prove that he should be a head coach at the UConn level? Even if not, it may only be a matter of time before we hear his name surface for other jobs.
Assuming UConn does remain a favorite to win another championship next season, who do you think some of the main contenders are as we sit here in early June, Kevin?
Yeah, you know, this is kind of funny. I'm not as big into UConn for next year as a lot of people are. I think they're getting a Dan Hurley bump, and certainly deservedly so. But at the same time, I don't love that roster as a roster that's going to go and beat people in March. I think you give them the benefit of the doubt, but generally speaking, I'm not sure that they're quite as good as what everybody's thinking. The Big 12, it feels like, has about 35 potential title contenders. You know, when you look at what Houston is bringing back, when you look at Kansas's roster, Iowa State, I think you don't want to say sneakily because a lot of people are projecting them as a top 5 team. But even with Houston and Kansas having what they have, it wouldn't surprise me a bit to see Iowa State win that league next year. A team that's kind of just off of that I think is interesting. Gonzaga brings back 5 guys who started, I think, at least 15 games this year, and adds back Steele Venters, who missed last year with the season-ending injury. They add in a couple key transfers as well. And so they've got that great mix of experience, depth, firepower. I think they could be the nation's best offense. And then Duke, just when you look at what they have around Cooper Flagg, the interesting thing with Duke is going to be whether that backcourt, whether Tyrese Proctor takes the step forward that a lot of people kind of have projected for him in the past. You know, that backcourt is going to kind of decide that. But if you're just saying, hey, let's line up our chips and see who the most talented team is, there aren't a whole lot of teams that are going to be able to go man for man with Duke. And Flagg's ability to defend not just his guy, but block shots off the weak side and everything, that gives them a major advantage in March as well.
Kansas had some news yesterday, obviously, with Elmarko Jackson getting hurt. They brought in the transfer from Mississippi State, which was in the works before that. How do they replace Elmarko Jackson, not only on the roster, just body-wise, but on the court? Because he was going to be – they were kind of counting on him to be a key rotational piece off the bench.
Yeah, I think that Elmarko Jackson was a guy that you heard a lot of buzz about this offseason already. You know, hey, he's regained his confidence. He's looking a lot more like the kid that people had projected as a lottery pick heading into last year. And I'm not saying he would have been a lottery pick, but he could have been a very key piece. And I think losing him doesn't necessarily impact Kansas's floor as much, especially with the addition of Shaquille Moore from Mississippi State. But I do think it impacts their ceiling, because there was certainly a scenario where he becomes one of the better 8th or 9th guys in the country. And you look at how teams play in March and in April, there's always a game in there that your bench players or a rotational guy, you know, he winds up winning for you that you don't expect. And I think that Elmarko had the ability to be that guy, to drop, you know, say 12 points in a 5-point win in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8. And so Shaquille Moore, an incredibly experienced guy, has more than 60 starts over his career. But at the same time, I'm not sure that Moore gives them quite as much upside as Jackson did. Kansas is now at, I think, 12 scholarships. They have a decision to make, because they have a chance, you know, potentially to win a national title this year, but they still have that NCAA penalty where they need to give up a scholarship either next year or this year. And so do you decide to go out and add a 13th guy to try and fill things out and sort of, you know, make sure you've got all the bullets in the gun, so to speak? Or do you look at it, say, we're, you know, reasonably complete. This is the year that we're going to take that scholarship away, and next year be back to 13 scholarships. It's an interesting choice for them to make.
Kevin Flarity. Kevin, tell them where they can find your podcast.
Yeah, you guys can find my podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all that good stuff. It's the Pay Heed Podcast, and can find me on Twitter at KFlarity, KCSN.
All right, Kevin, always great to talk to you, buddy. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Kevin.
There you go. Kevin Flarity, friend of the show, kind of one of our go-to college basketball guys. Next week, I think, Garrett, I'm going to get Ryan Andrade back on.
Okay.
When the decision is made.
Yeah.
Which I'm worried he's going to be tomorrow.
More than likely. It probably will.
It's going to be tomorrow. When we're kind of doing something special tomorrow, and I won't be able to do anything about it, but there's a show tomorrow. Don't worry about that. But it's something we're doing different because we've got some stuff going on here. But anyway, but yeah, I think Dan Hurley's gone. I think he's gone. I mean, it's there. Luke Murray's side benefit, by the way, would be his dad is Bill Murray. So
that helps.
Yeah. Needs more Bill at basketball games.
Yeah, like he's one of my top candidates for whenever Leonard Hamilton decides to retire at FSU, like, because he's a great, you know, X's and O's guy, a great recruiter. And, you know, Bill Murray, like, if I can see Bill Murray wearing FSU stuff, I mean, I don't know how much happier I could be.
Yeah, Bill Murray is on my bucket list for dream guests to ever speak with, so I'm with you there.
Yeah, he does. Like, if you walk up to him at a college basketball game, I mean, you can probably get him. Mm-hmm.
You're hanging out at a frat house in some random town where his son is coaching a game. He may very well show up and start washing dishes.
You know, one of the things he does, he lives in Charleston.
Yeah.
And so, like, when he's there in Charleston and people are, like, having wedding photos, he photobombs people's weddings.
That's
all
right.
the time. And so you can look, like, it's a whole thing where you'd be like, oh, look, there's Bill Murray in this, you know.
Isn't he involved with that minor league team?
Yeah, the River Dogs.
Yeah.
At least he used to be. I don't know if he still is.
He and Mike Veck were partners. He used to be part owner of the Fort Myers Miracle where I grew up. I don't know if he still does, but yeah.
He was a part of the independent team, and was it the St. Paul
Saints,
or another?
Yeah, the St. Paul Saints.
Yeah.
Mike Veck, whose father was Bill Veck, who was like a famous owner known for his stunts back in the day. Like he's the guy who had
Eddie Goodell,
Eddie Goodell, little guy, like all
Disco Demolition,
the guy with one arm, like Bill Veck, Disco Demolition. It was 2 days ago was the 50th anniversary of Cleveland's 10-cent beer night.
I saw that.
And I think there needs to be like a comedy movie made about that. Like I can see it now where it's just like a whole bunch of stories intersecting. Like there has to be a through. It can't just be about 10-cent beer night. There has to be like a through line story to it. But like that to me would be a hilarious backdrop for like a comedy. It's in the 70s. Like it's like essentially a riot and an orgy and like
it's like Dazed and Confused with beer and baseball.
Yes, exactly. When we come back, let's get to know Trey Elling. This is 365 Sports.
Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness on Lakeshore Drive in Waco. Right now with training packages, 6 one-hour sessions for $340 or $60 for one session. 30-minute sessions for $190 for 6. Randall Corley, Lori Hole, Robin Nelson, Nathan Roach, and Christy London are the personal trainers at Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness. And oh, by the way, Father's Day coming up. Spoil your father the healthy way. Get your father what he wants. Visit the Pro Shop for closeout pricing on all Technofiber rackets at $119, a personal training package, a tennis or pickleball clinic gift card, or maybe even a membership. Camp Fimpo, partnership for day passes. Excited to partner with Camp Fimpo just down the road on Lakeshore Drive. Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness members will now receive $5 off Camp Fimpo day passes. Hawaiian Falls Water Park special season pass offer exclusively for Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness members. $49.99 Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness season pass. $10 savings with exclusive offers beyond unlimited admission for a season pass at Hawaiian Falls Water Parks right next to Waco Regional Tennis and Fitness on Lakeshore Drive in Waco.
Automatic Chef Canteen is a full-service micro-market vending and office coffee provider with state-of-the-art vending equipment, a wide variety of products, and offering custom-fitted micro-market vending office coffee solutions for your employee break room. You want a full break room solution and a workplace oasis? Well, Automatic Chef Canteen, locally owned and operated for over 50 years in Central Texas, also includes in-house mechanics on call 24/7 for fast, reliable service and maintenance. Automatic Chef Canteen, 6900 Imperial Drive in Waco, or online at automaticchefcanteen.com.
Our good friend Brad Boozer, Boozer's Jewelers here at 365 Sports. Now, Brad, people who watch and listen to our show know I'm a double-time customer for you, engagement ring and wedding band, and you guys do that great, but that's not all you do at Boozer's Jewelers.
Absolutely, and I always like to say, it's a new year. It's a great way to start the year out. Go through your old jewelry. Go through your wife's jewelry box. Go through anything you're maybe not wearing, something that's broken, something that you're not using. We do a massive amount of custom work. We can take your old jewelry, old diamonds, old watches, and we can convert it into something special for you and make a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. And if that's not something you're interested in, a great thing is we can turn that into cash. So we buy gold, we buy diamonds, we'll buy Rolex watches, any kind of heirloom jewelry, anything that's maybe passed down to you.
Boozer's Jewelers, where do they find you, Brad?
We're at 1025 North Valley Mills Drive, right on the corner of Lake Air Drive and Valley Mills with the big clock on the corner.
This is 365 Sports.
The Sikkim 365 app is brought to you by Allen Samuels Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat. Come by, let's be friends.
Well, it's almost 2 hours into the show, and Trey Elling, to most of you, remains a mystery. Which, maybe to most people that are his friends, he remains a mystery. To his wife, to his children, there might be something mysterious about him that keeps drawing them in to get to know him better.
If that's code for dad's a weirdo, then yes, you are exactly right about that.
Yes. So, Trey, you and I have known each other for a little while, kind of tangentially. We reconnected it's almost 2 months ago now, at Andrew Baker's wedding. Andrew Baker used to be our producer. He is good friends with Garrett as well.
Trained me.
Yeah, he trained Garrett. Garrett took over for Andrew. And so we were at Andrew Baker's wedding.
Fun-loving soul. Great wedding, by the way.
Yes, great wedding. Although there was a part that was, I have to tell the story. I waited for you to come on so that we could.
Sure. I know where you're going here.
Because there was a thing that I've never seen at a wedding and will never see again at a wedding because only Andrew Baker would do this. Someone who, I don't know who gave him, a can of the world's smelliest fish.
One of his European visitors that he met on the Camino a number of years ago.
So Andrew, when he left us, he had gone through a breakup, and it really hit him hard. And so he wanted to go on a trip before he changed jobs that, just to give him, some kind of, he's a man of always going out for self-discovery and trying new things. He's a very interesting dude.
Yep.
He has many leather-bound books.
Yes. He is, he can be really he's one of those dudes who can be like, oh God, Andrew. Oh God. But he is also the most loyal, amazing friend in the world.
True.
He's the dude that when you bring him places, you're like, this is going to be fun, but I'm in for whatever. I'm ready.
May have to be talking us out of a situation.
Yeah,
too.
I may he's that guy. So he went on this Camino, which is a walk through Spain and France, hundreds of miles, and it takes a month.
Weeks,
yeah. And so it's weeks at a time. And so it was a real life-changing experience for him. So at his wedding, some of these people he met on the Camino came all the way to Austin to come to this wedding. He's remained very close with them. He plans to do it again with his wife. But they brought him the can of the stinkiest fish in the world. Now, I got married just 8 days from now will be my first anniversary. I can tell you this. If I had said, hey, let's open a can of stinky fish at the wedding, I would have been divorced in an hour. Given the fact that my wife doesn't even let me cook fish when she's home, then that's not even what would be called stinky fish. That's I go to the seafood market. I say, when did this fish get here? They say today. I say, okay, great. I'll cook that. No. We don't do fish in the house. When she goes out of town, it's a seafood tower at my house all the time. But he opened this can of the stinkiest fish in the world.
If only it smelled like fish.
It was awful. Awful. Awful, awful, awful. It was, and so much that I had to find, after that point, the places that were upwind from it. Because if you walk to a certain part of the wedding, even though they went down and threw it in a trash can that was far away, if the wind changed, you're like, what is that?
Yeah, it was a lot like being in Lubbock, Texas, with the slaughterhouses on the outskirts of town. If the wind is blowing the wrong way, you're getting a face full of nastiness, unfortunately.
Yeah, or was it Greeley, Colorado has that, where Colorado State has a paper some kind of reclamation plant?
Oh, I didn't know about this.
Oh, yeah. I think I've heard about that one too. Yeah.
It smelled awful.
Yeah.
And I walked away from the opening of this fish immediately because I'm like, I don't want to subject myself to this disgusting smell. I didn't realize this is what was going on. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even walked over here. I went to the dance floor, which was literally, 200 to 300, 200 yards is probably a little bit of an overestimate. Probably 100 yards away, though. And at times, to your point, when the wind would change, you could smell it. And it was wretched. It was rancid. If only it smelled like bad fish. If that was the only smell, great. It was like bad fish combined with a stink bomb, combined with a used diaper. It was awful.
All on a dead body.
All on a dead body, sure.
I mean, that was it was the worst smell. And Retired Stockbroker says, surströmming from Sweden. That is it. That is
Swedish
the thing.
fish, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Swedish, that's it. It's illegal to fly on planes, which, again, does not surprise me that Andrew had someone smuggle it.
That seems fitting.
into the United States. But Trey and Andrew were friends. We're friends. We were at the wedding. I said, Trey, you got to come up and do a show with me. And then this week worked out with the Smokes being gone. So Trey is a big Longhorn fan. You heard that.
Yeah, real quick. I always knew that you didn't want to smell rotten fish at any point after the wedding reception on that night if you were the groom. But now I know that you don't want to smell rotten fish during the actual reception itself as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well played, sir.
Thank you.
Well played. Absolutely well played. Yes, that was terrible. We got in the car, and Amanda goes, "What is wrong with him?" I said, "So many things. So many things. To try to pin it down to one thing would just not be right."
My wife, who loves him, asks that very same question pretty much every time we hang out with him.
What is wrong with Andrew? I'll just tell you, Andrew, we had a situation where we had a plan. We were going to drive back. I can't remember what happened, but we were going to drive back from New Orleans with like my mom or something from the Sugar Bowl a couple years ago. And we were like, we just felt awful. Amanda had wound up, like, she and Smokey both got COVID on that trip. Ooh. Like, it was all a bad deal.
Was that the Sugar Bowl year?
The Sugar Bowl year.
Yeah.
So we decided, like, hey, we're gonna fly back. But we had flown out of Dallas, and we had taken an airport shuttle there, and they couldn't come and get us in Austin that day. So I called Andrew, and I'm like, hey, can you drive us home? And he's like, abso-freaking-lutely. Like, 12 hours notice. I'll cancel all my plans. Like that's the
type of dude he is.
That's who Andrew is. That's who Andrew
is.
Very
loyal.
But he also does, crap like that.
Very loyal, and he drinks way too much Malort, which I also encourage sometimes.
Yeah. All right. So what else do we know about you? We need to know about you.
I live with my family in Austin, Texas. I've got a beautiful wife, Justine, and 2 kids, ages 9 and 7, almost 10 and 8. The 9-year-old is a girl. The 7-year-old is a boy. And amongst my broadcasting ventures, I currently host a daily show on ESPN Austin, 1027 ESPN, from 6 to 7 p.m. And then I have a podcast that I'm very proud of called Books on Pod, where I speak with authors, comedians, musicians, filmmakers about their stories. And you can find examples of that by going to my website, booksonpod.com, or searching Books on Pod with Trey Elling, wherever you listen to podcasts. And I am somebody who has lived all over the state of Texas in my life and had the pleasure, speaking of getting out of that comfort zone, we talked about that at the start of today's show with college sports figuring out a better solution than what the NCAA offers. When I turned 30, I moved to southwestern Oregon and then ultimately Chicago, which is where I spent about 7 years and really came into my own as a human being, which I'm very grateful about that. And now the running joke, because I bring Chicago up way too much during my own broadcasting ventures, is anytime I talk about Chicago, you have to take a drink because I mention it way too much. But that's how important it is to me, though, Paul. And fortunately, my wife and I were at a point just after we had our daughter, so almost 10 years ago, where we had the opportunity to consider where we might want to live outside of Chicago, and we decided to move back to Central Texas, which is where I went to school at the University of Texas and where I started my broadcasting career as well. And so we think that we made a right decision. We are living in Cedar Park, so we're not technically in Travis County, so we avoid some of the BS drama that goes along with being in Austin proper, while still having access to that wonderful city, including what is a thriving comedy community now.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a huge nerd for stand-up. It's one of the secret reasons why I enjoy getting to do a show with you right now. I know you're very quick-witted, very quick on your feet. You are a stand-up at heart, an improver at heart, and so that's something that I love about getting to be in Austin now. I go see literally 2 or 3 comedy shows a month, and typically it involves world-class comedians. 2 nights ago, I was at the Comedy Mothership. That's Joe Rogan's club. Mm-hmm. Hans Kim opened, who people may not know him, but he's a Kill Tony guy, followed by Ron White, then Tom Segura, Tony Hinchcliffe, and Joe Rogan. It was almost too much comedy. By the time Rogan got on stage, I'm like, we could be done right now, and this would have been more than worth the $50 that I paid for this ticket.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got to break because we got to get to Jared Sandler. So, Garrett, are we back on track?
Yeah, we're good.
We're back on track. Okay, Jared Sandler's next, and then we are straight on till morning. This is 365 Sports.
Cars priced right, day and night. Average your car in Texas. Trucks built for you, red, white, and blue. Average your car in Texas. Cars that zoom with lots of room. Average your car in Texas. Count on us, a dealer to trust. Average your car in Waco, Texas.
One size fits all. be all right for an adjustable belt or cheap sunglasses, but when it comes to your financial needs, no one wants a one-size-fits-all strategy. Ben Erlinson, your Edward Jones financial advisor, knows that his most important goals are yours. That's why he takes the time to understand your needs, knowing you. That's how Edward Jones makes sense of investing. Ben Erlinson, 100 North 6th Street in Waco, 254-759-8533. Edward Jones, member SIPC. Petty Clinic Men's Healthcare in Woodway is now proud to offer you men an exceptional weight management body sculpting product called semaglutide, also known as Ozempic or Wegovy. Semaglutide is an FDA-approved weight management medication. Once-a-week injections of this powerful medication offers an average body fat weight loss of 20% within the first year of treatment. In addition to body sculpting, semaglutide also normalizes blood sugars and has the clinical research proof of reducing blood pressure, cholesterol, stroke, and heart attack risk. If you're like most men and you have stubborn fat that will just not respond to typical diets and exercise, then help is finally here. Semaglutide, affordable, highly effective. Google search Petty Clinic Waco and reach out to the Petty Clinic team today for a free consultation with Dr. Petty to see if semaglutide is right for you. Go to pettycliniclowt.com.
Pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. Sick 'em, Bears.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 5 o'clock hour is sponsored by Edward Jones Investments with financial advisor Ben Erlinson, who'll navigate you through today's financial climate. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now here's Paul Catalina.
Alongside guest co-host Trey Elling today, and we've had a lot of fun with Trey. But now we bring in Jared Sandler, part of the Rangers broadcast crew. My favorite crew in the business. One of the best, top to bottom. And Jared's on TV, he's on the radio. He's doing it all. He's a multimedia star now, and I get to say I knew him when he was just pre and post, and now all the way through. Jared, always great to have you on the show. I'm going to ask you some USC questions as we get to the end, so we keep our college football street cred as a podcast. But first off, Corey Seager and his hamstring. I guess it was his turn to get hurt because everyone else has.
Yeah, no kidding. Golly. I'm hopeful the Rangers dodged a bullet there. You know, the fact they didn't need to get imaging after the game is a good sign. You know, Bruce Bochy is usually pretty honest when a guy has an injury and after the game he feels like it might be some time, like with the Josh Young injury early, 2 months ago. He was pretty honest before it came out that he had the fracture. He's like, this isn't going to be just a quick turnaround. And he said, I think it's going to be all right. I don't think it's that serious. So that's a really good sign. Now, the thing is with Corey, he's had hamstring issues before, specifically on the left side. And so, I'm curious to see how delicate they are. If they work him back in, is he going to be off tomorrow and then back in Saturday? Will he DH? Because this guy's health is of the utmost importance to this team because of where their lineup is right now. They withstood it last year. He missed 31 games in mid-April through a part of May with a hamstring injury, but that was a different time. Everyone was hitting back then, and so they were able to weather that storm. Right now, he's been the brightest spot in a lineup that really has not had a lot of bright spots this year.
And unfortunately, on the injury front, Evan Carter is going to be missing some time now with a stress fracture in his back. This is not the first time he has suffered such an injury. Had a similar thing happen a few years ago. Just how concerned are the Rangers that this is something that is going to linger long term?
Yeah, I think, they from the standpoint of making decisions, Evan's not a free agent anytime soon, and so they're not faced with any sort of contractual decision. It's one of those deals where they're really in a place where they're just going to bust their tail to try and get him healthy, and when he's healthy, he's going to play. But yeah, there's no doubt that it has to, enter their mind. And a lot of people this past off season, myself included, wondered if the Rangers were going to entertain one of these extensions that we're seeing more and more commonly given out to young players like Evan of his talent very early on in the process, even before arbitration. I mean, heck, I think there was some thought that maybe the Rangers would try and sign Wyatt Langford to one of those types of deals, and a deal where it allows the player to enter free agency still at a peak year in their career, but also guarantee them some money. And if they turn out to be studs, then, the team probably ends up saving a little bit of money. But now with Evan Carter, does that change their approach, knowing that the back might be a concern? So, yeah, it's a fair question. Back stuff is never something that I don't know. You don't like when any player gets hurt, but, if a guy breaks his forearm, you feel good about the fact, all right, it's going to heal up, and then hopefully, once he regains strength, and it might not be right away, but he'll be fine. With a back thing, you just don't know. It seems like that's there's a lot more mystery, a lot more unknown with that. And with a guy like Evan Carter who relies on athleticism, and his speed, you'd certainly hate for that to be compromised because that's a big part of his game. And hopefully with a month of rest and then a rehab assignment, he's going to come back and be okay. But yeah, I mean, that's at his age. You don't like back injuries at any age, but at his age especially.
Wyatt Langford hasn't hit for the power yet. Jared, are you surprised about that? I know he's had his bumps and bruises as well.
Yeah, I think so. I'm definitely surprised. I'm not surprised that Wyatt Langford is not like an MVP candidate, like some people thought he would be after spring training. I mean, it's just I'm not saying that it was unfathomable and it wasn't going to happen, but every year it seems like we get baited into this mirage that is spring training. And, you can get baited into it because a player just is awful in spring training and you just think it's absolutely hopeless, or, the other side, which is kind of what happened with Wyatt Langford. It didn't help that Wyatt had all this hype and excitement. There was a story in spring training that came out that the Rangers, had him ready in Arizona throughout the playoffs in case there was a need. And it just sort of seemed to, help shape this narrative that, he was even ready last year. And so he's definitely going to be ready this year. And, the reality is he's entering the league in a year in which offense is down in a big way. And so, his numbers relative to the league, they're not good, right? He's not a league average player offensively by any means. It's not as bad as maybe if he had these numbers, say, 2 or 3 years ago. But you're right. The lack of power and really the lack, like he's hit one home run. It was an inside the park home run. And he hit that ball. It was, a near home run in the air. He really has not had many of those. There have not been many balls off the bat where you're like, oh my gosh, this one's got a chance. A lot of ground balls, a lot of pop-ups. And, some people like to use the word timing. Other people say that timing is just an excuse to kind of be a catch-all for other issues when you're hitting. Whatever the case is, he is not squaring the ball up the way he did in spring training. And frankly, guys, he's spent 40 days in the minor leagues. The idea that, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if I told you a guy had spent 40 days in the minor leagues, he was coming up, you would think, oh my gosh, you're crazy. We're seeing a little more advancement at a faster pace these days, but the idea that Wyatt Langford was just going to hit the ground sprinting was probably a little silly. The fact that he was going to hit the ground running was maybe a little silly, but to witness the results the level or the lack of production. I think that also is a little bit of a surprise, but I guess will just be a part of his learning curve.
Cautious optimism that the rotation is starting to get healthier now. John Gray notwithstanding, of course. Eovaldi has a couple of starts under his belt, and it looks like Max Scherzer is getting closer. What is Scherzer's current status, and what happens with this rotation when he's able to come back?
Yeah, the crazy thing, guys, and this is just it goes to the whole idea that the minute we think we have a clue, we really have no clue. The rotation has been awesome in spite of the fact that, they've had 76 starters who are on the IL, right? I mean, it really is. It is impressive. I think it's 18 straight starts in which their starters allowed 3 or fewer earned runs. I mean, that is really impressive. I think, unfortunately, the injuries have hurt the bullpen because they've had to take guys like Jose Urena, for instance, and move him into the rotation, and his absence in the bullpen has been felt. I think Jose Urena, Andrew Heaney, Dane Dunning, I think those guys could all find themselves in the bullpen. And the reality is, as fragile as it's been so far, there's nothing to say that the whack-a-mole is not going to continue. I hope that as guys come back, other guys don't go down. But, the good thing is they clearly have demonstrated that they have depth to weather this. You'd like to have your best group. Eventually Tyler Mahle will come back. And eventually, Cody Bradford will come back. You mentioned Max Scherzer. The guy who's coming back this Sunday, John Gray, that with an off day today and an off day Monday, they really don't need a sixth starter. It's not like they're in one of these, wacky stretches where they just don't have off days. So I think their options are they can go Dane Dunning to the bullpen and have him pitch in a 1 to 2 times through the order type of capacity. Or you could, and the reality is John Gray, while he hasn't been out a while, they might not be ready to let him go 90 pitches. So maybe they need someone to piggyback him. Or you could go Andrew Heaney, who would be able to provide a little bit of versatility in the bullpen because right now they only have one lefty. And one of the guys who they've relied on to get lefties out, or at least plan to, is now their closer, and Kirby Yates. And he's a righty, but, lefties just don't hit him. And the other guy is David Robertson, who's really your second of maybe 3 really trusted relievers. And so there's just not nearly as much flexibility in the way Bruce Bochy would like to use those guys. And so when you only have one lefty, and your starter only goes 5 innings, you're probably missing out on some opportunities to match up. But, what if Jake Latz isn't available, in a given game? Well, now you have no lefties. And so, as good as Andrew Heaney has pitched in the rotation, especially since his second outing, there might be a lot of value in having Andrew Heaney go to the bullpen just to provide that threat of having a second lefty in there.
The trade deadline comes up in a couple of months, and the Rangers may look like a team that just sent all their prospects away for the trade deadline, with Scherzer going to be back by then. Josh Young's probably going to be back by then, and he seems to be the fire starter in the lineup, even in spite of the other guys that they have. Like last year when he was out, their offense dipped, somewhat for that rough stretch where it looked like the wheels had maybe fallen off. And again, you didn't mention Jacob deGrom in all that as well. This could be kind of a wave of guys onto the roster that can help them boost them back into playoff contention.
Yeah, no, without question. Now, you mentioned the trade deadline, and that has been brought up in the last few days. And here's the reality. I think the Rangers at 30 and 32 have played themselves into a spot where it is at least fair to ask the question, would they sell? And the answer is we have to wait and see, right? Like if you want a real answer, are the Rangers 5 back of a playoff spot? Are they 5 back in the division, but in second place with 2 series left against the Mariners and, a bevy of guys coming back, as you mentioned, or are they 10 games back of the division and maybe 8 games back of a wild card spot with 4 teams in between them, right? I mean, there's still so much time between now and the deadline that things can turn for the Rangers or things maybe don't turn, and they can't really get on a roll, can't get in a rhythm. But I do think that there is a scenario in which the Rangers would at least have to consider not buying and maybe selling. But I think, again, to your overarching point there, they're already basically, they've got these built-in trade deadline acquisitions with all the guys who are going to be returning. And hopefully they start to get some of those guys back in time for the front office to really have an understanding of what to do and where to go. We always say that the team tells the front office what to do by the way they play. But the reality is, while that is still true with this group, the team that they hope to have for the final 2 months of the season hasn't really played. Too many critical parts have either not played at all or played a very minimal role this year. And so it is going to be interesting what they do. I know, there's a lot of thought internally amongst the league that Seattle's, not a team that's going to run away with it. I think I'm more bullish on the Mariners than most. But the reality is with a third wild card spot, you're likely not going to be totally out of it. The challenge is always when you're in that kind of gray area. It's not clear one way or the other. And I can't imagine that this team, with the personality of their general manager and Chris Young, who's very aggressive, coming off winning a World Series, that if they're in that gray area where it's not quite clear whether they should buy or should sell, I just can't see them selling. I could see them maybe being a little more conservative on the buying front, but I'd really have a tough time seeing them selling unless it is clear cut. But you just, unfortunately, with the way things have gone, you cannot rule out the possibility that 6 to 8 weeks from now, it's not more clear cut. And maybe the arrow is pointing in the direction of selling off some of these guys who are going to be free agents at the end of the year.
Completely agreed with that sentiment. The Rangers almost certainly are not going to be selling. If they're buying and considering some of the guys are going to be getting back over the next month plus, what do you think a position of need might be if they are on the market looking to add that one additional piece?
Yeah, and that's the other confusing thing too, is because you're going to have some of these guys coming back right around the time of the trade deadline, and you're just not sure what you're going to get from them. I think Evan Carter is probably trending right around that time. All-Star break maybe shortly thereafter. Josh Young, hopefully a little bit before the All-Star break. Jacob deGrom will be after the trade deadline. Tyler Mahle will be right around the trade deadline. But I think that a right-handed bat is going to be something they would target, someone to help them hit lefties, because, hey, Robbie Grossman is really good against lefties, but Robbie Grossman shouldn't be hitting third against lefties, right? And I think they know that. And Josh Young maybe fits that mold, but they really miss, that Mitch Garver and Josh Young against lefties. Obviously Josh Young's been hurt. He's going to come back, but Mitch Garver's not coming back. He was really good against lefties. So someone, maybe a right-handed bat, corner outfield type spot. And again, this is all contingent upon the Rangers, having these guys healthy. I think you got to look at maybe getting some power at first base. Unfortunately, Nathaniel Lowe, as good as he is at getting on base, the power's just kind of left him. I think he's gone 18 straight games without an extra base hit. And they really need some power from that spot. So hopefully he can turn it around. But if not, maybe that's something they consider. I don't think, as crazy as it is, unless there's a guy they can buy with multiple years of control, I don't think starting pitching is going to be a huge priority just because they have demonstrated a great level of depth. But I think, obviously bullpen will be a big priority. And I think that probably goes for any team that's contending. So, that market has always been and will remain very competitive at the deadline. And, relievers just don't go for cheap these days, especially the high quality relievers that you want to add at that time to fortify your bullpen.
All right. Before we let you go, the obligatory USC question that we have. First year in the Big Ten. Look, they open it up in Las Vegas against LSU. The schedule, I think they got a fairly, decent hand for first year in the Big Ten. It's not the Gators, schedule this year, but it's not too easy. It's not too tough. It's pretty fair. What do you think year one Big Ten for your Trojans?
Yeah, I think it's transitional. They're obviously going to a new quarterback in Miller Moss, presumably, right? He's going to be the guy, and hopefully he performs at a level where they don't need to make a change. And I think, someone asked me, do they need to change their offense? I don't think they need to change their offense. I think, they could maybe find some advantages with the more physical, rougher, but maybe not as fast in the open field Big Ten defenses, but their defenses need to toughen up or their defense. And so, I know they've been very active in the transfer portal. I know recruiting's gone well so far, but they're going to have to really change the way that they attack things on defense because if you were to just take their defense this year, forget the fact that they suck. If you just took the fact that they're all 6, their best linebackers 6'4", $150, that's not going to fly in the Big Ten. So I don't expect even with the expanded playoffs this year, right? Yeah. So even with the expanded playoff, I guess they'll maybe compete. I don't expect them to make it, but I am hopeful that maybe after a year transitioning their roster over to one that's more befitting of Big Ten football, that they'll be ready to compete. But I'll be honest, my expectations are low for them this year, including that first game in Vegas, in which they're going to get their ass kicked by LSU.
Our producer Garrett Ross, LSU fan, just pumped his fist. Jared, enjoy your off day, and thanks for
Game 1 of the NBA Finals. Let's go.
That's right. What do you got, Mavs? I got Mavs in 6.
Well, I predicted the Mavs are going to lose every series, and it's worked out favorably for me from a fan standpoint. The Mavs are my first love. If you want my honest answer, I think it depends on how healthy Porzingis is. I don't care that he's playing. I need to know if he's healthy and can really impact the series. If he can, then I think that's going to be tough sledding for the Mavs. And if it is a very healthy version of Porzingis, I would say Celtics in 5. If not, then give me the Mavs in 6. But I've picked against them the whole way, so I think I almost want to pick against them just to keep that vibe going. Yeah,
so Celtics in 5 from Jared Sandler. There we go. They've won enough, Jared. They've won enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Screw
right. Those guys.
Thanks, man. We'll talk to you again.
See you, fellas.
Yeah. Thanks, Jared.
One of my favorite guests. Absolutely.
He's great.
And one of Garrett's favorite now, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, no.
Thanks, Jared.
So, that crew, Sandler, Hicks, Nadell, Mike Bassick, comes in there. They're great. They are fun to watch. If you can't, if you can in your market or listen to it. Again, baseball is still the most perfect radio sport there is. So
yeah,
you can. I don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've turned. That's where I will turn the volume down on the TV and put the radio broadcast on and.
It moves at a pace that is perfect for the descriptions necessary for play-by-play, and there's enough downtime that if you're a really good storyteller, you know how to crush it in between.
Yeah. Listening to Vince Scully, Vince Scully was doing podcasts before all the rest of us were. He was just doing it in the middle of a baseball game.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you would listen to Vince Scully for 9 innings, do a podcast about baseball. That's what it was, because he would have these things where he'd be like, all right, Don Mattingly out to the mound. Of course, there's an interesting fact about Mattingly when he's playing for the Yankees, and he just goes through all that, and you're like, golly.
He got so good that he was telling stories and interweaving the play-by-play in between.
Yeah.
Like a guy isn't at bat, and he's talking about walking down the street in San Francisco and passing by a group of people who are offering free hugs.
Yeah. Free hugs, by the way. It's a 3-2 count now, and there goes Steve Sachs. He's taken off. It was unbelievable. So
Steve Sachs makes an appearance in every single one of his stories. It's the wildest thing.
All right, Garrett, I know that, we only have 2 more graphics, right?
Yes, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
So
see what happens.
This is from On3.com's Jesse Simonton. And he has, we'll do the ACC first and we'll do the SEC. He has this broken off into tiers that he has the over-under win totals for each team in the league. Now, he says too high at 4.5, 5.5, 5.5, and 4.5 for Boston College, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Virginia Tech. At just right, 9.5, 9.5 at Clemson, 8.5 at Louisville, 7.5 at North Carolina, 3.5 Stanford, 8.5 Virginia Tech, 6.5 Cal, 6.5 Duke, 9.5 Miami. Don't worry about it, Garrett, if you can't get it up there. 7.5 SMU, 7.5 Syracuse, 4.5 Wake, and too low, NC State and Florida State at 8.5 and 9.5 respectfully. Trey, your thoughts on those?
I'm not going to lie and tell you that I know the inner workings of the ACC right now. I will say this, though, that Clemson is going to get their asses kicked their first game of the season playing Georgia in Atlanta. And I just don't have a ton of faith that Dabo understands how to properly lead a college football program in the NIL era. Yes, he does return his quarterback, but there was a big question mark with regards to the weapons surrounding Cade Klubnik last year. And offensive line play, even going back to their championship-winning teams, was always mediocre at best or maybe slightly above average. It wasn't elite, though. That is bad now, and while the defense still does bring a lot to the table, I just think that offensively they are so lacking, it's going to cost them at least 3 games this year, if not 4. I have them as an 8 or 9 win football team, so I guess technically that 9.5 is the right on number, but I think they do fall short of that.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. So you can see it now. Damn these computers, robots in these modern times. Yeah. I'll be the one in the Terminator, like living underground in a shipping container, rallying people to fight against the robots. I will definitely be that guy. I think the 2 high ones, I don't think he's fair on Georgia Tech. I think Georgia Tech will beat that. I don't really know about Pitt. We'll see. They got Eli Holstein's quarterback now, and he was highly recruited to Alabama, and he's there. Virginia and BC, that's probably about right, given the status of the rosters. Clemson's probably about right. Louisville, I might say a little bit under that, just because we don't know if Tyler Shuck can be healthy and what the quarterback depth is there. North Carolina, it's all on Max Johnson, to stay healthy and lead that team.
Oh, Max Johnson, not Mac Browns. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. But Stanford 3.5. Yeah, we don't know what's going on there. It's going to be tough.
That's never going to feel right, Stanford in the ACC.
I might take Virginia Tech at 9 games. I really might.
That would be a good one.
They're on the upswing. And the rest, Miami 9.5 is about right for them. They could very well exceed that given the roster they have. But like we talked about earlier, Mario Cristobal, has to get out of his own way.
I'm taking the under on that one. I don't know about Duke either. I think that Malik Murphy is the quarterback there now. I know people are high on him coming out of Austin. It was more of a mixed bag than a lot of people realize if you watch the entirety of those games. Steve Sarkisian had a really good opening script for him. When he was having to do more thinking and improvising on his own, it was a major struggle. So there's probably going to be a pretty big struggle for year 1 for him as a starter in Durham.
Yeah. And for the 2 lows, yes, I will take the over on NC State with Grayson McCall at quarterback. One of the, I think they finally have a guy who can do some things there. Devin Leary got hurt right as he was starting to peak, and then it didn't really work out for him as much at Kentucky. And I think Florida State's going to win 10 games. I don't think that they're going to win 13 again, but I do think they're going to win 10.
Man, they lose a lot on both sides of the ball, especially on offense. DJ Uiagalelei, wait, he's not the quarterback there. Who is their quarterback? Okay, he is their quarterback. He showed some nice things at Oregon State last year, but I'm still a little bit suspicious of him. I think they fall below that 9.5.
Yeah, I think their schedule sets up well that they can beat it and go over. But I'm not saying they're not going 13-0 again. And look, if they do, then God bless America. But I do think there's going to be some trip-ups in there. It's really hard to go undefeated in any season, and it's about to be harder even now. So them going 13-0 last year and going through the regular season, win the ACC like they did, I still think they're probably the favorite to win the ACC. But and the reason I think that they're going to be fine is that their offensive line is mostly back and they've kind of improved along the offensive line. They do lose Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. That's enormous.
Yeah.
Losing Kalen DeLoach at linebacker is huge too, even though he was a bit of a lower draft pick. He was just a guy who kind of came out of nowhere and made plays. But their secondary is mostly intact. I mean, they lost their corners, but they had guys that played a lot.
Right.
So they had depth on defense. Their scheme on defense is lethal. They've brought in Marvin Jones Jr. They've got guys. I think they'll exceed it. I don't think they're going to, again, 11-1, great. 12-0, great. If they go 13-0 again, God bless America. But I think they're a 10-2 team.
Okay.
I do. I think they're 10-2. And I don't know what those two are going to be. I don't know what those two. I think one of the One of the Clemson-Miami games is a loss, and then there's a loss in there, a rando.
At Miami?
Well, that's never bothered them recently, but, I mean, that's a better team, than it was. Miami played them a lot better, actually, last year than they did, of course, 2 years ago. Florida State could have left. they could have been like, you guys want to stop this? And Miami would have been like, yes, please, God, please stop this. This is awful. But, so I think they're over. Like, Notre Dame is going to be tough when they have Notre Dame. But
at Notre Dame, you're right, November 9th.
Of that Clemson, Notre Dame, Miami, I think there's a loss in there, and I think there's a rando.
And they're getting Florida on a good year at the end of the season because Billy Napier is likely going to be fired before the end of the season. Because Florida, if nothing else, they have a brutal schedule. So they're going to be in tatters by the end of the season.
We're going to go to the SEC right now, and this is your area of expertise. Florida is actually listed on the too low predictions here at 4.5. I would say that's too high.
I agree.
I mean, they are not going to be – they are only going to be guaranteed to be favored in 1 out of 12 games. Now, they might be favored in others, but only guaranteed in 1. And they're not going to be favored against Miami. They may not be favored against UCF. There's high likelihood that, they may not be at that point in the season. Now, look, there's a lot of people who are high on what they brought in on offense with Elijah Badger to go with Eugene Wilson, both really good weapons, and DJ Lagway's waiting in the wings, and maybe he can be a guy who can contribute to them. They're high on Graham Mertz because he didn't throw a lot of picks last year, but they won 5 games. They won 5 games a year ago. They won 6 the year before. They won 11 games in 2 years. They're 11-13 in 2 years.
And things have gotten pretty ugly behind
11-14 in 2 years.
And things have gotten pretty ugly behind the scenes for Napier with some of the alum, too. They are not happy with him. There was a call for change this offseason. It didn't happen just yet. So, look, maybe that serves as a rallying cry, but again, their schedule is rough. They get Samford game 2 after they play Miami. A&M at home. A&M is in a bit of a rebuild right now. At Mississippi State, they're not going to be great, but UCF at Kentucky, or at Tennessee, Kentucky at home, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. That is a murderer's road to end the year.
If they win one of those games, he should keep his job.
Maybe.
I mean, honestly, in the middle of that, they just pull off a win and say beat Ole Miss or something. All right, there you go. You get one more year.
I don't have a good sense for LSU, so maybe that's a more winnable game than I realize right now, but
I mean, LSU, when you bring in Blake Baker to be your defensive coordinator, you got some pieces to work with. They've got to shore up their secondary. They didn't really do that well last year through the portal, and they've addressed it some this year. And up front, you're really going to have to rely on your defensive line, which they've lost some talent there. And then offense, man, you're bringing in a new receiver with C.J. Daniels coming in from Liberty. You know what you got in Kyron Lacey, but Garrett Nussmeier is going to have to learn this offense. He's done a good job learning the offense, but now he's going to have to take it to a level where you're backing up a Heisman Trophy winner. So I don't know. I think there's going to be a learning curve there, but that's one that they could probably win.
Yeah.
I love what you guys did in going and getting Bo Davis from Texas. Of course, Bo Davis is an LSU guy originally. He is one of the top defensive line coaches in the country and an excellent recruiter as well. That has already paid dividends for you guys.
Bo Davis is the one, I credit him with the rebirth of the program.
At Texas,
he's
big part of it.
He's the one. Not to mention, Byron Murphy, Javondre Sweat, notwithstanding, that part of it that's where Texas got its true groove back, because they never stopped having guys that were studs on at the skill positions. They never stopped having those good players. Now those players were not as highlighted and didn't get as good because they got beaten up because they didn't have good linemen up front. But certainly, that's where Texas, if you look at the 05 team and how deep they were on the lines, that's why, that's what allowed Vince Young to completely flourish, was that, he only had to worry about, one guy hitting him at a time, and he was so much bigger and faster that it wasn't, I just have to get by one guy, not 3. And they've done that again, but I do think that the culture reset happened because of Bo Davis.
Because of what happened after the Iowa State game?
Because of the He said everything that needed to be said, and he was the guy that he was the proper messenger. Steve Sarkisian was he's the overlord of that, obviously. He's the guy who's seeing it over, but that was not the button that he had. And that's fine. But like Bo Davis.
It shouldn't be, by the way.
Exactly.
You want your strength and conditioning coach headbutting helmeted players. You don't want your head coach doing that. Now, that wasn't a headbutt of a helmeted player, but he ripped into them.
But Bo Davis, like getting on that bus and like telling people, like basically the first time I think it'd been probably said in the way that the players needed to hear it. Because there was this 2005 is the best and worst thing that ever happened to Texas, right? Because they proved that they could win in the modern era. And then it created this generations of entitled players that they were getting in there that had done nothing that the guys who built that did. You know, so
I don't totally agree with that because they still remained good through the Colt McCoy era. If anything, Mac Brown hamstrung the program. He did become a bit of a fat cat and too reliant on the recruiting services. But what screwed them more than anything was losing Colt McCoy in that national championship game in early 2010 because he saw what Alabama did to win that game. And he said, you know what? Despite the fact that we've been recruiting on offense to cater to this spread offense, which we think has taken over college football and will continue to do so, which he was right about at the time, we're actually going to shift gears and we're going to turn into a power running team. It screwed the entire roster, but it especially screwed Garrett Gilbert, who had spent the last 8 years of his football career going back to Pee Wee football, throwing from the spread and playing from shotgun. All of a sudden, he's expected to go under center to go along with the fact that they got lazy with their recruiting. And unfortunately, it turned into very much a mixed bag. And then more than a decade before they could finally start to get things back on track, or what feels like back on track right now.
They were good, again, because the 2005 allowed them to recruit to that level.
Yeah.
So they were able to do what they could, and they could do that. But once Colt McCoy walked out the door, and those guys walked out the door, the vestiges of the 2005 team, the guys who spilled their blood and guts to win it, they're all gone. And it was all these people who are like, well, I'm a Texas Longhorn. Like, dude, do you know what these guys, how they had to come together and build it and beat Oklahoma, when they're on the rise and deal with the best Texas Tech teams ever, and like all these bullets that they warded off, and they did that not just because of Vince Young, because of all these guys, the Quan Cosbys and the Jordan Shipleys and all that.
Oh, you mentioned Michael Huff earlier. There were a ton of dogs on those rosters in the early to mid 2000s.
And those guys had no level of entitlement past what they earned.
Well, to your point on the importance of line play, Texas is likely going to have a first-round offensive line draft pick in next year's draft with Kelvin Banks, right? He's been predicted to be so since he started as a true freshman in Austin. It'll be the first time in more than 20 years they'll have had a first-round offensive lineman or first-round draft pick as an offensive lineman since Mike Williams, going all the way back, I want to say to 2002 or 2003, selected by the Buffalo Bills. In spite of that, they were still able to have those successes, not getting elite offensive line play. And it does feel like things are in a better place now because of Steve Sarkisian snagging Flood away from Nick Saban in Alabama. He is, we talk about it with Bo Davis on the defensive side of the ball. Flood has had a similar impact with that offensive line, and they're finally starting to establish that depth now, too.
Yeah. All right, let's go through the rest. He's got Arkansas 4.5 too high. I agree with that. I don't know what's going to happen there. I do like some of the moves that Arkansas has made, some of the guys they've gotten, but ultimately I just don't see it, man. I don't see it. I think they're going to be in the market for a coach next year. The SEC, in my opinion right now, the SEC jobs that are definitely going to be open are Florida and Arkansas.
You're probably right about that. It's so strange because Sam Pittman, through his first 2 years, even that first year when they lost, I want to say they went 3-9 maybe, or 4-8. That team was fighting hard each and every game, and you finally started to see some results in year two. So you thought last year would be that year where all of a sudden they spring onto the scene and the opposite happened. So now I'm with you. I do not have any faith that Sam Pittman is the guy in Fayetteville anymore, but we shall see. They do get Texas at Arkansas this year, so they get that game at home, and you obviously have the A&M game in Jerry World. I'm not sure what the rest of the schedule looks like, but Arkansas has tough sledding because this is a good conference this coming season.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I have to get into a Twitter thing now. After I went in the break, somebody said something that I said on the show a couple days ago, which I totally didn't. So
what?
Now I have to realignment nerds. Realignment nerd said I said something that I didn't say, or nobody even said. When Brian Murphy said that there might be some teams from the Big 12 that would be interested in the ACC because of where they are located, but that was just like him.
It's just
talk. I mean, it wasn't anything like, yeah. And he said, yeah. Here's the thing. The guy said, I saw something from 365 Sports about UCF, Baylor, TCU, and Kansas may want to go to the ACC. Paul Catalina covered it yesterday, the day before. Absolutely not. I did not. I did nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort.
People have selective hearing.
Nothing of the sort.
And by the way, he wasn't talking about Mac Brown's junk either. He was talking about Max Johnson, the quarterback.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's another show for another day. Here he has in the Just Right category, Auburn 7.5, LSU at 9.5, Mizzou at 9.5, Tennessee at 9.5, A&M at 8.5, Bama at 9.5, Georgia at 10.5, Mississippi State at 4.5, OU at 7.5. I might tick them up a little bit if Jackson Arnold is as good as I think he's going to be, but I do think there's some growing pains there, and they've got a really tough schedule. And then Texas at 10.5. I think that's about where they need to live, and I think they'll probably there's a good chance they're 11-1. But I see them losing a rando. I think I see everybody losing a rando this year. I don't, you know.
Texas A&M at 8.5. Is that not high? That feels a little bit high, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would say maybe 7.5 is about where they are. But but look, 7.5 because it's 8-4. Like that's their thing. But here's what I think. A&M is going to step forward by drawing back a little bit because Mike Elko will allow them to be who they are again. Anytime that they try to be they've since they joined the SEC, they have tried to be like flashy SEC. It's not who they are.
Right.
It's not who they are. This is they're still at their core guys who wear khaki. That's what they are. Be that. And you'll be their most successful times are when their teams are tough as nails. They've got a couple of stars that make big plays, but ultimately the team is just tough. You know, the R.C. Slocum era teams were tough. They would fight you in the street.
Jackie Sherrill.
And even then it was a little flashier. Like R.C. Slocum got him back to the roots, right? R.C. coached with Bill Snyder for a little bit. So he had that in him and all that. So yeah, that's what I think. I don't know if he'll be able to do it because the powers that be outside want them to be a Lamborghini when they are a truck. Be a truck.
What do you think about Oklahoma at 7.5?
I think that's a little too low. I like Jackson Arnold. I think he's going to do well.
Okay.
But again, the schedule's rough, and this is a new reality for them. It's a new reality for Texas too. Texas is just was fortunate not to lose their coach right before they went in and had to have this transition period.
Right.
So Texas, this timed out well for Texas. It didn't time out well for Oklahoma. Bottom line.
I think that's a good way to put it. And in a way,
if Lincoln Riley was still at Oklahoma, I would have no qualms about saying they're probably going to roll in the SEC and be fine because he had everything going pretty well there. Even with that dip in his last year at Oklahoma, he would still have had Caleb Williams coming back for another year, a year in which he won the Heisman Trophy at USC. Probably would have won it at Oklahoma. You know, all those things. He doesn't leave. I don't think anything really changes it at OU all that much. But since he did, and they've had to restart like they have, they're not used to this. It hasn't happened. Yeah.
OU fans have a ton of respect for Venables. That almost works against them because they don't want to do this guy wrong. They want to give him the proper amount of time. But it does seem like we've seen some red flags over these last few years that suggest that he may be topping out as a defensive coordinator versus a guy leading a program like he's having to with Oklahoma heading into the SEC now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, that's going to do it. Trey, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
We've got the top 5, and then we're done for the day. Hope everybody has a magical weekend. We've got a preview show tomorrow that is all of our segments on just ball. We're talking ball. We're not talking NIL. We're not talking transfer portal. We're not talking lawyers. Ball. We're just talking ball tomorrow. So you see that in the segment. I've got a wedding to go to in Houston, so I have to leave. So that's why we're doing that. But it's going to be a great show. I'll jump in the chat room and talk to you guys. I want to know what you think about the assessments that we have on all these things. You'll see some stuff with Trey. You'll see some stuff with Josh Neighbors, some stuff with Garrett. We've got lots of stuff to give you tomorrow. This is 365 Sports. Top 5's next.
It's the season to rev up your drive with Alan Samuels with the new Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram in Waco. Your ultimate destination for unbeatable deals and top-notch service. Looking for a reliable ride to conquer these beautiful spring days? Look no further. The powerful trucks and sleek sedans are the perfect SUV. We've got the perfect vehicle to match your style and budget. Over 300 new vehicles to choose from. Now's the time to make your move. Enjoy special discounts, low financing rates, and incredible incentives. But hurry, these offers won't last forever. Alan Samuels in Waco.
Come by. Let's be friends.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be a part of the Waco community. We're a small family business right here in Central Texas, and our goal is to bring down the cost of healthcare while maintaining high quality. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important, and unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. That's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through the difficult time. We offer premium MRIs just like a hospital with state-of-the-art technology and specialists, but you'll pay less. Sometimes thousands of dollars less, whether you're using insurance or not. At Ideal MRI, we accept most insurance and there are no hidden costs. Even offering financing if that's needed, everything included in the price, and you'll not get something as a surprise in the mail later on. If you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. They'll know. You can schedule an appointment safely from home online in minutes at idealmri.com or give us a call, 833-IDEAL-MRI, idealmri.com.
TFNB, your bank for life, is the official local bank of Baylor Athletics. Find out why more Central Texas are making TFNB their bank for life. Sign up for our Edge checking and savings accounts to earn interest or cash back. With 5 convenient locations and an award-winning mobile app, banking has never been easier. TFNB, your bank for life. Member FDIC.
You want to know why Stonewood Dental is so successful? Listen to what happy customers have to say.
Pleasant. It's different than any other dentist office. I really feel like they care. And it's not that you're here for 2 hours waiting on someone to take care of you. It's quick and easy, and I bring my kids, and my kids love being here too. They really love the treasure box. Staff is really nice and accommodating, real friendly. You feel more like home. It's not sterile looking. Everybody has their own personalized rooms with decorations and decor, and they'll even have a blanket for you when it's cold. I've recommended people to actually come here, and they are patients now. I really love it here. It feels like family.
Learn more, stonewood-dental.com.
It's time for Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas-raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Hey, how you doing? Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. And that greeting brought to you by Being Italian. Top 5 college football Hall of Fame locks. Let's go. Number 5. I don't know, the greatest coach of all time, and Nick Saban, won 1 billion national titles, won at 2 different schools, pretty much charged the SEC into what it is now, a complete dominant force of marketing and football power. That's Nick Saban. And look, not to take away credit from anybody else who helped build it. In fact, the next coach we're going to mention did that a little bit as well, but this is the guy who is the face of the modern SEC, just retired, so normally he wouldn't be on the ballot, but he's over 70 years old, so now he's on the ballot. There's no doubt, first year going in, the greatest football coach of all time in college football, Nick Saban going in. Another well-accomplished, multi-time national championship coach at 2 different schools who should go in. Urban Meyer. Oops, I'm sorry. That's not, is that the right, that might not be the right picture. I'm sorry. Hold on. This damn thing. Urban Meyer. I mean, that's a picture of Urban Meyer and Aaron Hernandez, but Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer. There he is with the national championship trophy. While he has a complicated history, all the guy did was win at Florida and Ohio State and Utah and Bowling Green and won national titles, 2 at Florida and 1 at Ohio State. So, yes, he's a college football Hall of Famer. But, I couldn't just let that go. I mean, number 3, Sean Taylor left this earth tragically too soon, a victim of a murder early in his NFL career. But I personally got to see Sean Taylor play a couple times, and he is maybe the best football player I have ever seen with these eyes in the same building. He was absolutely amazing. The perfect combination of size and speed. He had just shy of linebacker size with just north of cornerback speed, which made him the perfect safety and would probably have been an NFL Hall of Famer had his life not tragically been cut short. And he is absolutely a college football Hall of Famer. Ask anybody who ever had these shoulder pads and that face mask buried right here. They'll tell you that's a Hall of Famer. Or the quarterbacks who literally said, "Oh crap, where's 26?" every time they dropped back to pass when they played Sean Taylor. Number 2, Aaron Donald. One of the 2 best defensive linemen in college football of his generation. I think the only other one you can make the argument with would be Ndamukong Suh, who was as dominant at Nebraska as maybe Aaron Donald was at Pitt. And, of course, he's just coming off his fantastic NFL career where he is retired and will be a first-ballot Hall of Famer there. But you cannot deny the dominance of Aaron Donald at Pitt and what he meant to that school and how lethal he was when he was there. Absolutely a college football Hall of Famer and a lock. And number 1, Mark Ingram. 2 Alabama guys on this list. I know that's a little obvious, but Mark Ingram, surprisingly enough, was the first ever Heisman Trophy winner at Alabama. Bear Bryant never had one. Gene Stallings never had one. Nick Saban had several, and this guy is one of them. And I don't know why I picked this picture. It just makes me happy, I guess. I don't know. But Mark Ingram definitely going in. Heisman Trophy winners are locks for the College Football Hall of Fame. I don't think I need to expound on that anymore other than to say that this was pretty awesome right here in this moment. On the other side of this GIF, I could have a guy crying, but I'm not going to do that. I've already dragged their team through the mud enough in this actual top 5. That's going to do it for us. Thanks to Trey Elling and all of our guests today. Trey did a great job co-hosting with me. We are back again tomorrow. You're going to see a best of some of the things we've done. We'll call it our College Football 2024 Preview Edition, where we're going to go through the nuts and bolts of the season, some comparisons, some conference things, and you'll see where we think maybe the season is headed, conference-wise, player-wise, and otherwise, all the way across the board. This has been the Top 5. This has been 365 Sports. Have a great weekend. We're all back together for the first 4 days of next week. Have a good weekend, everybody.